Let me tell you a terrifying story. You're on a flight 35,000 feet in the air, sipping coffee, listening to music over your earphones, when suddenly, a hunk of metal the size of a baseball rips through the plane like a bullet from space. No warning, no escape. Just a silent demise falling from the sky at 17,000 miles per hour. Sounds like a disaster movie? Perhaps, but it's also a very real scenario, and this should be a wake-up call. Right now, Earth is being surrounded by thousands of pieces of space junk like non-functioning satellites, rocket parts, or orbital shrapnel. Most burn up, some don't, and aviation experts warn, it's only a matter of time before one of them punches a hole in a plane full of passengers. Think the sky is empty once you're above the clouds? Of course not. In fact, it's busier than ever, from both above and below. Every day, around 100,000 flights crisscross the globe. At the same time, thousands of satellites, old rocket stages, and debris fragments are zipping through space just a few hundred miles above your head. We've basically turned low Earth orbit into a junkyard, and commercial planes are flying just beneath it. It's like cruising down the highway while someone dumps metal scraps from a bridge overhead. It might miss you, until it doesn't. So what exactly is all this flying trash? It's called space junk. Basically, all the stuff we once shot into orbit that's now just floating uselessly around up there, drifting, waiting to lose enough speed to come back to Earth. Think non-functioning satellites, spent rocket boosters, metal fragments from past missions, and the occasional wrench or bolt lost during a spacewalk. Right now, researchers say there are over 2,300 rocket bodies still circling our planet, and that's just the big stuff. In total, we're tracking tens of thousands of objects larger than 4 inches, and possibly millions of tiny pieces too small to see, but large enough to cause serious damage. Here's the scary bit. This junk zips around Earth at the speed of 17,000 miles per hour. That's fast enough to turn even a paint chip into a flying projectile. A piece the size of a coin could pierce a spacecraft or an airplane like paper. Most junk burns up in a fiery goodbye, but sometimes a stubborn chunk survives the fall. So far, no commercial airplane has been struck by falling space debris. Lucky us. Or lucky you. I don't fly that often, but luck doesn't last forever. There have already been plenty of close calls. Large chunks of junk have survived re-entry and crash-landed on Earth, sometimes near homes, farms, or even highways. In one case, a pressurized metal fuel tank from a rocket landed in Texas. In another, a long metal panel dropped into a remote field in Australia. In 2022, the situation became super serious for a few hours. Spain and France temporarily shut down parts of their airspace due to an uncontrolled re-entry of a Chinese rocket. Over 600 flights were delayed because no one could be certain where that chunk of metal might fall. That was the first time in history that air travel was interrupted because of space debris. And if current trends continue, it probably won't be the last. Now, picture that over the US on a holiday weekend. Jam-packed airports, thousands of flights, and suddenly, sorry folks, we might have some heat-resistant screws coming from space. Flights will be resumed soon. The problem is that re-entries can't always be predicted with pinpoint accuracy. Agencies often get just a few hours' notice, and the impact zone could stretch across hundreds of miles. So, aviation officials face a tough choice. Close huge chunks of airspace, or roll the dice with thousands of passengers in the sky. According to recent research, some of the world's busiest airspaces already face a 26% annual chance of being affected by an uncontrolled re-entry. That's more than 1 in 4. And not because anyone's being reckless, it's just because the numbers are exploding. Over the past decade, the number of objects in low Earth orbit has doubled. And here's the real danger. The more crowded space becomes, the higher the chance that debris collides with more debris, creating even more debris. It's called Kessler syndrome, a kind of orbital domino effect where one collision triggers another, and another, until entire orbits become unusable. And with companies like SpaceX and national space agencies launching more and more stuff into space, we could be setting the stage for exactly that. Meanwhile, back on Earth, we're flying more than ever. Commercial air traffic has more than doubled since 2000. That means more people in the air, more planes in flight paths, and more chances for a tragic overlap between something falling and something flying. And when that moment comes, there may be no warning. And if that moment ever comes, we probably wouldn't even see it. I mean, before it hits the news. Even with all our fancy satellites, spotting a tiny metal thing dropping out of orbit is nearly impossible. But again, most debris doesn't make it to the ground. As these objects plummet through Earth's atmosphere, the intense heat from re-entry usually causes them to burn up completely. That's especially true for smaller or lightweight pieces like aluminum fragments or insulation. Also, even when stuff does survive re-entry, a mid-air collision with a plane is extremely rare. Planes cruise at 35,000 feet, while falling space junk comes screaming down from hundreds of miles up, whizzing past that height in seconds. The chances of a plane being in the exact spot at the exact time are incredibly slim. It's like tossing a dart from space and trying to hit a mosquito flying across a football field, while blindfolded. The timing, the alignment, the odds? Practically zero. But with more darts and more mosquitoes? That's why experts are still worried. The amount of space junk is growing fast. More stuff falling means more chances for something to go wrong. And while the odds of a direct strike remain low, the risk of aerospace disruption is very real. So, can't we just clean it up? You'd think that with all our high-tech satellites, space stations, and reusable rockets, someone would have invented a cosmic vacuum cleaner by now. But space cleanup is way more complicated than it sounds. For one, the junk is moving fast. Snagging this stuff is like trying to catch bullets while being strapped to a rocket yourself. There's also the size problem. Some pieces are too small to track, and others are too big to ignore. Plus, no one can agree whose job it is to clean up the mess. If a country launches a satellite that later breaks apart and becomes debris, is it their job to retrieve it? So far, no one really knows. Okay, when said like that, it sounds impossible even to me, but I have faith in scientists. However, it's not all bad news. The European Space Agency is pushing for a zero-debris policy for future missions. They want every satellite and rocket launched to have a built-in plan for getting out of orbit safely. Meanwhile, scientists are working on robotic grippers, basically giant space claws that could one day grab junk and fling it into a controlled burn in Earth's atmosphere. This goes to show that the problem is understood, and while difficult, the cleanup is not impossible, if we address it in time. The sooner we start taking it seriously, the better the odds that your next flight stays boring and uneventful. You know, the way flights are supposed to be. Unless you sit by the window, then it's breathtaking and awe-inspiring. So the next time you're staring out your airplane window at 35,000 feet, relax. You're more likely to spill your coffee than get hit by space junk, or upgraded to first class by accident. Scientists, engineers, and even robot claws are already on the case. Space might be messy now, but we've cleaned up bigger messes before. And with the right moves, we can keep the skies safe for everyone. And who knows? Maybe in a few decades, you'll be booking a window seat for a flight out into space. Just make sure it comes with asteroid or junk insurance.
There are so many ways to make airplanes safer. For example, they could have ejector seats so that every passenger could be rescued. In reality though, it's way more difficult than it sounds. If there were ejector seats, your trip would be very different. Everyone would have to be strapped into a seat with a harness to make sure they wouldn't fall out of it. Then you would have to wear an oxygen mask all throughout the flight. An emergency can occur at any time. Then, ejection in itself is a big pressure on your body. Even fighter pilots who are physically prepared can still suffer severe injuries. For an average person, this process wouldn't be safe. So, however cool it sounds, ejection seats aren't very practical and are actually quite dangerous. Okay, well, at least they could have a parachute for each passenger. But this wouldn't be very useful either. Parachutes only sound like they can save many lives. First, having them isn't efficient. They're very costly and heavy. So a plane would need to burn more fuel while flying if there were parachutes on board. It would all be worth it though if parachutes could make an actual difference to the safety of people, but they can't. Commercial planes aren't designed in a way that would make it safe to jump out of them, especially with a couple hundred people on board. Next, passengers aren't trained to use them. Imagine there's an emergency. The plane is falling, and 200 people are trying to deal with a parachute for the first time in their lives. It would be an absolute mess. Lastly, it's not safe to jump from the high altitudes planes fly at. So, oxygen masks, life vests, and boats are the best life-saving equipment, and every plane has those. You know those huge engines that they have under the wings? Yeah, look at them. They don't look safe at all. Birds can get pulled in, and it actually happens. They could at least put a grate in front of the rotating parts to prevent birds from getting in there. Turns out those engines pull inside huge amounts of air, and this is crucial for them to work properly. The more air gets swallowed, the more air gets compressed, mixed with fuel, and burned. And then, more of it gets pushed out from the other side, keeping the plane going. A cover at the front would be a barrier, significantly reducing the air inflow that is crucial for the proper work of the engines, and this would endanger the passengers. But hey, don't be too upset. Birds fly way lower than planes do, so they're only in danger for a few minutes at the beginning of the flight while the plane is climbing altitude, and at the very end when the plane is landing. So very few of them ever get pulled in, and if they do, it's never a threat to the engines or passenger safety. Planes also don't change up the gears like cars do, so technically they can't go backwards. The reason for this is that planes don't need to go backward. They can just turn around and move in the opposite direction, but face first. The only time when they need to move backward is when they have to get to the gate. And for those times, there's help. Pushback tractors. Those are small vehicles that can connect to airplanes and move them in the required direction. Watch out for those next time you fly. But technically speaking, planes can go backward if the engines start pushing the air forward instead of backward. But this is very dangerous for everyone around. One of the very few cases when they do it is during landing, to help slow the airplane down. There are cameras on the outside that let pilots navigate taxiways better. They come in especially handy during tricky maneuvering. But do you know there are also cameras in airplane cabins? You can relax, there are no cameras in the lavatories. But yes, they are there in the cabin, and for security reasons only. Flight attendants monitor them to see what's not visible from their own seats. Of course, flight attendants can check everything just by walking down the cabin, and that's exactly what they do most of the time. So, cameras are mostly used during takeoff and landing, when everyone, including flight attendants, is supposed to sit down, as those are the most dangerous stages of a flight. Notice that it's exactly during these stages that the rules are particularly strict. All electronic devices should be turned off or put on airplane mode, and big electronic devices should be stored away. Window blinds should be raised and tables folded. Seats should be put in the upright position. You need to have your seatbelt fastened, and so on. This is all done for safety and to ensure fast evacuation in case of emergency. So let's discuss these rules. Airplane mode on electronic devices is important to make sure that the signals that devices transmit don't interfere with the plane's electronic systems. If they interfere, they will block the radio's frequency pilots need to get their instructions. Do you remember that clicking sound a speaker makes right before your cell phone gets a call if the two devices are close? This is the sound pilots might hear while communicating with air traffic control. Now, putting away large devices like laptops is important because they might turn into obstacles if you need to get out of the plane fast in case of an emergency. All the pathways should be as clear as possible. This is why everything should be packed away, seats straightened, and tables folded. There should be nothing blocking anyone's way. And lastly, window blinds. The lights on the airplane get turned off too. Those two things are done to make sure your eyes get used to the natural light outside the aircraft. Imagine it's night, some emergency happens, and the lights that were left on suddenly go off. People need to evacuate as fast as possible, but their eyes aren't adjusted to the dark yet, and they can't see anything. This will slow everyone down. If the lights inside are out, people get used to the darkness and will be able to evacuate faster. The same goes for window blinds. If it's day and they are raised, people are used to the light outside and can evacuate faster. Another reason is that when blinds are raised during landing, people outside can see what's going on inside the plane. For example, if there's fire or smoke and where exactly. This way, they can plan the evacuation process better. Also, you might have noticed black triangles drawn above some windows on the airplane. These triangles mark the seats from which the view on the airplane's wings is the best. It's needed for the crew to find the spot as fast as possible if, in case of emergency, they need to inspect the engines, slats, or flaps. This little triangle saves the plane crew a lot of time. We do talk about emergencies a lot, but they really don't happen often. It's more dangerous to drive a car than to fly by plane, and most of us get in the car every day. Yet, the fear of flying is still very much out there, and people can get superstitious. In many cultures, the number 13 is considered unlucky. So, airplane companies that often fly to those destinations just omit row 13. It's a small thing to do, but it can spare a few anxious passengers who happen to sit in row 13. In other cultures, like in Italy and Brazil, 17 is the unlucky number, and some aircraft have both rows 13 and 17 missing. In airplanes that fly to China, they can often omit row 14 instead. The passenger cabin is filled with crying people and terrified flight attendants. At least 30 people have some kind of injuries. Many have found themselves far away from their seats after being thrown around the cabin. These are the horrifying results of a plane flying through an area of severe turbulence on its way from Spain to Uruguay. Due to this, the aircraft even had to travel to Brazil instead. Luckily, the plane landed safely, and the injured passengers were taken to local hospitals. Similar incidents have happened before. Take a flight from London to Singapore in May 2024. Then, dozens of people were hurt and one person didn't survive severe turbulence. Flights are indeed becoming bumpier, and we might have the answer as to why. But first thing first, turbulence is when a plane feels shaky because of uneven air movements. This happens because of changes in wind speed or direction, often caused by things like mountains, jet streams, or storms. Airlines can often predict where turbulence will happen and try to avoid it. Pilots and crew know how to keep passengers safe if turbulence happens. Turbulence can cause anything from small bumps to more serious shaking. But in very extreme cases, the plane could lose control for a moment or even get damaged. Airlines spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year on damage, delays, and injuries from turbulence. Even though turbulence can be scary, serious injuries or demise are rare. Between 2009 and 2023, only 37 passengers and 146 crew members were seriously hurt due to turbulence. Meanwhile, the number of flights has gone up from 26 million a year in 2009 to about 40 million today. Turbulence is getting worse these days because of changing weather patterns. Recent studies show that severe clear air turbulence in the North Atlantic has increased by 55% since 1979. This increase is happening in other parts of the world too, especially over the US, which has some of the busiest air travel routes. This worsening turbulence feels intense, like hitting a deep pothole while driving at 60 miles per hour. Unfortunately, severe turbulence, especially turbulence in jet streams, fast-moving winds that flow around Earth, could double or triple in the coming decades if weather changes continue at the current rate. And this is concerning, since jet streams are very important for air travel, affecting flight times and the overall safety of flights. Commercial airplanes usually fly at very high altitudes, 31,000 to 42,000 feet, where the air is much thinner and planes use less fuel. At these heights, planes also encounter jet streams. They travel as fast as 275 miles per hour. There are 4 main jet streams on Earth, and they affect air travel in different ways. For example, when a plane flies with a jet stream, it can shorten travel time as the plane is assisted by the wind pushing it along. But when planes fly against the jet stream, there is more resistance, which makes flights longer. Warmer air is now making the wind in the jet stream behave differently. Wind shear, which is the difference in wind speeds at different heights, is increasing in the jet stream because of the rising temperatures. This makes the turbulence in jet streams stronger, especially in places like the North Atlantic. When a plane is flying at about 550 miles per hour and encounters this turbulent air, it shakes and moves suddenly. It's like skating. When you're skating on smooth ice and then suddenly hit a rough patch, you feel a jolt and a change in movement. In the case of turbulence, the plane experiences forces that make it move in ways that it normally wouldn't. As a result, passengers can be thrown around if they're not wearing seatbelts. Scientists predict that turbulence will continue to worsen as global temperatures keep rising, mostly due to increasing volumes of greenhouse gases like CO2, which trap heat in the atmosphere. In fact, 2023 was the warmest year on record since modern record-keeping began in 1880, and the last 10 years have been the warmest decade ever recorded. The increase in CO2 levels in the atmosphere is also the highest it has been in at least 800,000 years, and likely much longer. It all means that turbulence is bound to get much worse. But turbulence is not just one thing. It comes in different types. Convective or thermal turbulence happens when Earth's surface is heated unevenly by the sun. Warm air rises in columns while cooler air falls, creating bumps in the sky as the plane flies through these moving air currents. You can mostly feel this kind of turbulence during the day, especially in hot areas or when the sun is shining directly on the ground. Mechanical turbulence occurs when the wind blows over obstacles like buildings, mountains, or even uneven landscapes, causing the air to break up and swirl, creating turbulence. Mountain wave turbulence happens when the wind moves over mountain ranges, creating swirling, wave-like patterns that continue on the downwind side of the mountains, leading to turbulence. There's also frontal turbulence at weather fronts, where warm and cold air masses meet, causing the difference in temperature and pressure and triggering turbulence. Plus, every plane creates turbulence behind it, especially around its wingtips, where powerful rotating air vortices form. If another plane flies too close behind, it can feel the effects of this wake turbulence, which can cause bumps or jolts. Thunderstorms can also result in turbulence. But the worst thing here is that even if a large and powerful storm is far away, it can still affect aircraft. But the worst of them all is clear air turbulence. It occurs in seemingly clear skies at high altitudes when fast-moving air flows next to slower-moving air, creating differences in wind speed and direction. The problem with this kind of turbulence is that it's invisible. Pilots can't see it. Satellites can't always detect it, and it doesn't show up on radar. This is why it can be such a surprise when it hits. One recent example of clear air turbulence was in 2023, when a flight traveling from Texas to Germany suddenly dropped by 1,000 feet during meal service. Passengers and crew were moving around the cabin when it occurred. After the plane landed, 7 people were taken to the hospital with minor injuries. Pilots are well trained and use loads of different tools to handle turbulence. They have weather briefings before takeoff to understand what conditions might be like during the flight. These reports help them plan the safest route. There's also onboard weather radar that detects weather patterns such as storms, which can cause turbulence. This allows pilots to adjust the route to avoid rough areas. Pilots from other aircraft flying along similar routes can report turbulence conditions in real time. These reports help the current flight crew make correct decisions. If turbulence is expected, pilots may change altitude or flight path to find smoother air. They communicate with air traffic control to make these adjustments. Plus,
Some advanced systems, like the IATA Turbulence Aware Network, provide real-time data from other flights, giving pilots up-to-the-minute information on turbulent conditions. And since clear air turbulence can't be detected by radar, pilots rely on weather forecasts, reports from other planes, and their own experience to navigate these invisible bumps. By the way, to minimize discomfort during turbulence, pilots sometimes even reduce the plane's speed. When clear air turbulence hits, planes can experience a sudden and temporary drop in altitude. This happens because the air suddenly becomes unstable, causing the aircraft to lose some of its lift. Although the drop is often brief, it can be terrifying. So, here's one crucial thing to remember. Stay buckled up at all times. Yes, even when the fasten seatbelt sign is turned off. Unless you need to get up for medical reasons or to use the restroom, remain seated with your seatbelt fastened, especially if you fly from Mendoza, Argentina to Santiago, Chile. This flight route holds the top spot for the world's most turbulent flight paths. The turbulence is caused by the way air moves and interacts with the Andes Mountains. This mountain range dominates South American flight paths. That's why other routes in this region also rank high on the turbulence blacklist. Outside of South America, the Himalayas and Asia also cause turbulent flights. Routes connecting cities like Kathmandu in Nepal, Chengdu and Qining in China, Lhasa in Tibet, and Paro in Bhutan are all affected by turbulence caused by the mountainous terrain.
The cabin shuddered with a loud bang, the cold air rushed in, and the oxygen mask dropped down. The 117 terrified passengers were staring at a 5-foot hole that ruptured their Boeing 737-300. One of them sent a text to his wife saying, "Plane is going down, I love you." It started as a regular flight from Phoenix to Sacramento on April 1, 2011. Takeoff and initial climb-out went as usual. But as the plane approached its cruising altitude of 34,000 feet, one of the ceiling panels fell down. A couple of seconds later, the captain informed everyone that the cabin had lost pressurization and instructed passengers to put on their oxygen masks. The sound of rushing wind grew louder. The captain quickly declared an emergency to air traffic control and was granted permission for an emergency descent. The pilots brought the aircraft down to 11,000 feet, where the air pressure was high enough to keep enough oxygen in the body tissues. Soon after, flight attendants reported an injury and a 2-foot hole in the fuselage. The pilots then requested to descend further to 9,000 feet. Ground control directed them to the nearest airport capable of handling a 737. It was Yuma International Airport. One of the flight attendants rushed to make an interphone call to the pilots or a PA announcement instead of immediately putting on his oxygen mask, so he lost consciousness, fell, and broke his nose. Other than that, there were luckily no injuries or major damage. The plane landed successfully and all the passengers survived. As it turned out later, it all happened because one of the joints failed much earlier than Boeing's engineers expected. Another plane that got into serious trouble was carrying 440 passengers and 29 crew members, 5 of whom were pilots. The flight was going from London to Sydney with a stopover in Singapore. It completed the first leg of the journey without a problem, took on fuel, more passengers, and a new crew to carry on to Australia. It took off and moved southeast across the strait toward Indonesia, passing over the densely populated island of Batam. After 4 minutes in the air, right after passing an altitude of 7,000 feet, one of the engines failed. Fragments of a turbine disc were tearing through its wings and fuselage in multiple places. The Big Bang severely damaged every critical system on board, including the flight controls, fuel tanks, hydraulics, and pneumatics. With a flood of failure warnings and an aircraft in unknown condition, the flight crew had to quickly assess the situation and make the right decisions to bring the massive jet down safely. They also had to deal with malfunctioning landing gear, a loss of braking power, and an engine that refused to shut down. Against all odds, they managed to land the plane flawlessly. All 469 passengers and crew walked away without a single injury. As it turned out later, an oil pipe in one of the engines had walls that were slightly too thin, and it led to all this. On May 24, 1988, TACA International Flight 110 took off from Belize City, heading to New Orleans with 38 passengers and 7 crew members aboard. The aircraft was new and everything was going smoothly until the plane approached New Orleans and encountered severe thunderstorms. The pilots tried their best to navigate through the storm, but as they descended through thick clouds at 16,500 feet, both engines suddenly lost power. The plane was gliding toward the ground through extreme rain and hail with no thrust. The pilots tried to restart the engines using airflow, but even when they turned them back on, they didn't produce enough of it to reach the airport. The pilots realized they wouldn't make it to New Orleans International Airport, so they declared an emergency and considered a water landing in the Louisiana wetlands. Air traffic controllers suggested an alternate airport, but the plane didn't have enough altitude or speed to reach it. But then the first officer noticed a grassy levee that could work as a runway. The captain quickly changed course and managed to do the impossible and landed the plane on the narrow strip of grass. It suffered minimal damage, and every passenger and crew member walked away unharmed. On October 16, 1956, Pan Am Flight 6 was on the final leg of an around-the-world journey when it took off from Honolulu, Hawaii for San Francisco. Everything seemed normal on the 4-engine propeller-driven aircraft until about 1:20 a.m., when the number 1 engine began to malfunction. The first officer tried to reduce power and lower the flaps to slow the plane down. It was impossible because the propeller continued to windmill and created extra drag. The crew was struggling to keep control of the plane, but then the number 4 engine also started failing. Soon it began backfiring, so they had to shut it down completely. Now running on just 2 engines, the plane couldn't maintain speed or altitude. They did some math and figured they didn't have enough fuel to reach San Francisco or return to Honolulu. That's when the captain radioed an emergency call. He knew that it would be too dangerous to try a water landing in the dark, so the captain decided to keep the plane in the air until dawn. He guided the aircraft toward a Coast Guard cutter stationed in the Pacific. When it was above the ship, the plane circled at 2,000 feet, then climbed up again to burn extra fuel and make it lighter. The captain asked passengers sitting in the back and near the engines to move forward. As dawn broke and waves started rising, he knew it was time. The crew made the final approach. The plane's tail snapped off upon impact and the nose dipped underwater. But thanks to their careful planning and the swift response of rescue boats, every passenger and crew member was safely rescued before the aircraft sank. Southwest Airlines Flight 1380 from New York's LaGuardia Airport to Dallas Love Field on April 17, 2018, was carrying 144 passengers and 5 crew members. At 32,000 feet, the left engine suddenly blew up and its pieces were flying around. The wing and fuselage were damaged and shattered a window in row 14. This caused rapid decompression. The pilots immediately began an emergency descent and changed course toward Philadelphia International Airport. The plane tilted hard to the left. Alarms started going off. The pilots put on their oxygen masks and fought to regain control. But even after getting it back on track, the damage made it incredibly difficult to fly. When the captain found out one of the passengers needed immediate medical help, she tried to speed things up and managed to land safely in Philadelphia. Sadly, even that and all the efforts of the flight attendants didn't help, and the passenger who was sitting in row 14 passed away. But thanks to the quick thinking and skills of the pilot and flight attendants, a much bigger disaster was prevented. Air Transat Flight 236 was cruising from Canada to Portugal when 3 hours and 46 minutes into the journey, a fuel leak developed in the right engine. The pilots didn't realize it at first. They thought faulty sensors were giving them incorrect readings. For over an hour, they continued flying as normal until they realized something was seriously off and diverted to the Azores for an emergency landing. By then, it was almost too late. The right engine failed when they still had over 170 miles to go. 75 miles out, the left engine also gave out, so the plane was completely powerless at 34,500 feet. The crew warned air traffic control that they might have to ditch into the dark and rough waters of the Atlantic Ocean. The impact could have shattered the plane, and the people on board would have minimal chances to survive. The pilots didn't give up and managed to glide nearly 75 miles and safely touch down. The moment the wheels hit the runway, the crew immediately started an emergency evacuation. Everyone on board survived, and they set a world record. The flight, later nicknamed the Azores Glider, became the longest passenger aircraft glide without engines ever recorded. Wow! This could have been one of the biggest disasters in aviation history. It was close to midnight at San Francisco International Airport when Air Canada Flight 759 approached for landing. The pilots were almost done for that day and thought they'd land as usual, but they were unaware that the airport looked different that night. Runway 28 right was open, while runway 28 left, usually parallel, was closed for maintenance, with its lights turned off. Despite having landed here before, the pilots made a critical error. Expecting to see two parallel runways, they mistook the center runway for the darkened 28 left and assumed the taxiway on the right was 28 right. What the crew didn't realize was that the taxiway wasn't empty. 4 planes were lined up there, waiting for takeoff, with more than 1,000 passengers in total, and their plane was headed straight toward them. There was a notice to airmen, which listed important details for flights, including this critical information. But these notices are long and dense, often stretching several pages, and the closure detail had been missed by the Air Canada crew. That night, the pilots were conducting a visual approach, relying on what they could see to align with the runway. This is normal in good weather, but is much harder at night. The crew had flown from Toronto and were tired after a long day. Their internal clocks were already past 3 a.m., and Canadian rules regarding pilot rest were less strict than those in the U.S. The captain had been working for nearly 19 hours without proper rest. As the plane got closer to danger, no one in the cockpit noticed they were on the wrong path. Planes approaching San Francisco often come in at a slight angle to reduce noise over the bay. It's normal for them to appear slightly off to air traffic controllers. But this added to the confusion, and the Air Canada crew kept heading toward the taxiway. When the pilots finally realized that something was off, they radioed the control tower to confirm their landing clearance. The controller, who was managing both air traffic and ground operations due to the late hour, took several seconds to respond. He cleared them to land, unaware that the plane was lined up for the wrong path. Meanwhile, the crew of one of the planes on the runway quickly radioed the tower, alerting them to the imminent danger. The tower immediately instructed the Air Canada crew to stop and go around for another attempt. The Air Canada pilots pulled up just in time, missing the parked planes by just a couple feet. The pilots, still shaken from the near miss, saved hundreds of lives. After the incident, a full investigation was conducted. Now, there are new safety measures, but there are still concerns about whether the lessons learned are enough. Recent years have seen an alarming rise in such awful close calls. Qantas Flight 32, a scheduled flight from London to Sydney via Singapore, encountered a critical emergency on November 4, 2010. Just minutes after taking off from Singapore's Changi Airport, as an Airbus A380 was flying over the Riau Islands in Indonesia, it encountered a serious problem. One of its 4 engines underwent an uncontained failure. For the next 2 hours, the crew faced a tense and difficult situation as they tried to figure out how badly the plane was damaged. The accident happened at 10:01 a.m. Singapore time. When the engine went off, pieces of it flew into the wing, damaging important systems. The fuel system was hit, causing leaks and even starting a fire in one of the fuel tanks. It also took out one of the plane's hydraulic systems, which help control things like the flaps and landing gear. It disabled the anti-lock brakes, which are crucial for safe landings. 2 of the other engines started to lose power as well, and the flaps, which help control the plane's descent and speed, were damaged. Despite the harm to the aircraft, the crew realized it was still controllable. They decided to circle near Singapore for about 50 minutes while they carefully checked the condition of the aircraft. The first officer and the supervising captain then used a special landing calculator to see if they could land safely at Changi, even though the plane was 50 tons heavier than its maximum landing weight. At first, the system couldn't give them a landing distance, but after adjusting for the fact that the runway was dry, it showed they could land with only 328 feet of runway left to spare. At 11:45 a.m., the plane landed safely at Changi Airport, but because it was going about 40 miles per hour faster than usual, 4 of its tires blew out when it touched down. After landing, the crew ran into another problem. They couldn't shut off the number 1 engine. Emergency crews had to step in and put out the engine themselves. The crew had to decide whether to evacuate the plane right away because fuel was leaking near the overheated brakes, which could have caused a fire. Captain David Evans later explained that, despite the risk, it was actually safer to keep everyone on board until things settled down. The cabin crew stayed on high alert, ready to evacuate passengers immediately if the situation got worse. To make things even tougher, the plane was running on battery power, which meant they could only use one radio to communicate with emergency services. Luckily, the danger passed, and everyone was able to leave the plane calmly using a set of stairs. Everyone on board, 440 passengers and 29 crew members, got out safely. On the ground in Batam, some debris from the engine fell on a school, houses, and a car, but thankfully, everyone was okay there as well. Just a few missteps could have made that situation turn out very differently, but luckily the crew handled it like heroes. Investigators eventually found that the problem started because a small oil pipe in the engine had been poorly made, leading to the disaster. This was the first time an engine failure like this had happened on an A380. It was, and still is, the world's largest passenger plane at the time. As a result, Qantas and some other airlines temporarily grounded all of its A380 planes to ensure they were safe. Another similar incident happened with Northwest Airlines Flight 85 in 2002. The plane took off from Detroit Metropolitan Airport at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. There were 4 pilots on board. About 7 hours into the flight, flying at 35,000 feet, an unexpected issue struck. The plane veered sharply, banking to the left. The pilots initially thought an engine had failed. The senior captain quickly returned to the cockpit and took manual control. An emergency was declared, and they decided to divert the flight to Anchorage. It was hard to communicate, as they were in a zone with weak signals. Eventually, they connected with another Northwest Airlines flight nearby, which relayed their emergency call to Alaska. The situation was so unusual that none of the usual emergency procedures worked. The flight crew called Northwest Airlines headquarters in Minneapolis for help, but even they couldn't find a solution. Thankfully, the pilots worked together to control the plane. They managed to steer the plane using the ailerons, and by applying more power to one engine than the other. This tricky maneuver allowed them to land safely at Anchorage. After the incident, the NTSB and Boeing investigated once again. The NTSB investigator described it as a dramatic event that required careful examination. They found a crack in the power control module for the rudder, which had caused part of its metal housing to break. This break was unusual because it affected the module's outer casing, not just the inside parts. The NTSB concluded that the crack led to what's known as a rudder hardover, where the rudder is pushed to its maximum position and stays there, causing the sudden dangerous turn. All of these horrible situations show how fatigue, miscommunication, and outdated procedures can lead to disasters. But the sheer number of them in history, especially in U.S. airports, raises the question of whether enough lessons have truly been learned.
An engine explodes during takeoff. The water injection system is switched off, and communication is lost. Now, this doomed plane faces the imminent threat of crashing into Athens or a hill. Will the captain be able to defy all odds and save over 400 lives on board? Stay tuned.
It's 2 in the afternoon. A Boeing 747 starts rolling down the runway, picking up speed. Just as Captain Sifis Megades lifts the nose of the aircraft, he's surprised by a loud bang. He has no idea what's just happened, but he's left with no options. The fully loaded plane is moving too fast to stop on the short runway space still left. The airplane begins its risky takeoff, and it's now heading straight for downtown Athens, which is absolutely crowded on a hot summer evening in August 9th, 1978. After the loud explosion, a flight attendant in the back takes the intercom and warns the crew about the catastrophic failure of engine number 3 located on the right side of the airplane. The flight attendant says, "I think we're screwed." And here's an honest, "Yeah, I know." The original plan of the Olympic Airways Flight 411 was a direct shot from Athens to New York. But now, this massive 370-ton jumbo jet simply doesn't have enough power to keep going up. The stress is through the roof. The flight is fully loaded with 18 crew members and 400 passengers, who are mostly US citizens returning from their Greek summer vacation. Little do they know that the pilot still has to face 4 major problems in a 93-second period to ensure everyone stays alive. The first issue has to do with water injection. You see, this Boeing has 4 engines. Engine number 3 has just exploded, and engine number 2 is operating with reduced power after maintenance. So the pilot needs the remaining engines to give their all to get this plane climbing. The thing is, pushing the engines to the max creates a ton of heat. So, Captain Megades asks the onboard flight engineer to double-check if the cooling system is on, preventing the engines from getting too hot and maintaining a safe temperature. It's a bit tricky to explain what went wrong at this point, but experts think that in the heat of the moment, the flight engineer might have gotten a little mixed up. Instead of ensuring the water injection is on, he does the opposite and switches the system off just 9 seconds after takeoff. This mistake further reduces the power in the engines, limiting the plane's ability to climb by causing a loss of 4,500 pounds of thrust. So now, the plane finds itself in a seriously bad situation, barely cruising over the rooftops at below minimum speed. The second issue with this doomed aircraft involves the landing gear. The 55-year-old pilot had already had over 30 years of experience when he was assigned to command this flight. So he decides to make a bold move by telling his co-pilot to pull up the wheels at 35 feet above the runway. This move isn't just risky, it's straight up against Boeing rules in situations like this. Pilots usually have to wait until the aircraft gains a bit more altitude to pull up the wheels, because popping those landing gear doors open for 15 seconds adds more resistance against the plane's forward motion. In other words, it basically slows the plane down, and that's why the co-pilot hesitates for a second before agreeing to break the rule. Against all odds, the 411 flight stays in the air, but the problems are far from over. This leads us to the third issue. The plane is getting dangerously close to hitting one of the oldest capital cities in the world, Athens. The flight started from Ellinikon International Airport. This was the main airport for the Greek capital for decades, and it was known as one of the trickiest and riskiest airports in the world. Picture this: 2 short runways, side by side, squeezed between the Aegean Sea and large mountains. Even though there were 2 runways, they mostly used just one, the one pointing planes straight at the center of Athens. Because of that, pilots had to make an immediate left turn right after takeoff, changing the flight path over the sea. Now you might be wondering, why doesn't Megades just turn left already? Well, the speed of the 747 is way lower than it should be at this point. If he makes a turn, the plane might descend even more, upping the chances of crashing right into the city. So, the captain decides to keep climbing, following a straight path while he's figuring out Plan B. Do you remember that the airport is surrounded by mountains? Well, this is problem number 4. The pilot knows that in about a mile, the airplane will face a hill that's about 200 feet tall. As Migatis watches Pawnee Hill getting closer and closer, he decides to give up a few knots of airspeed to gain the altitude he desperately needs to fly over the hill. Migatis feels relief when he sees that his risky plan has worked. The airplane flies over the hill with only 9 feet to spare. Yet, the relief fades quickly. He still needs to come up with an emergency landing plan. Imagine the cockpit eerily silent. They don't have contact with the tower anymore. While the two pilots are doing everything they can to keep Flight 411 from crashing, the flight engineer is still focused on fixing the problems with the engines. The terrain gets lower after the plane flies over Pawnee Hill, so the captain decides to lower the nose of the plane to trade a bit of altitude for speed. But nothing happens. In fact, the airplane's speed just keeps dropping, and they're barely exceeding an altitude of 200 feet. The plane is so low that it's even taking down some television antennas. It's around the height of a 14-story building named the Inter-American Tower. The airplane gets so close to that building that some flight attendants can actually see people's faces inside. A happy ending seems unreal as the plane is approaching a catastrophic collision with Mount Aigaleo, which is over 1,500 feet high. But suddenly, the engines kick in with more power and the plane starts picking up speed. Some specialists believe the acceleration was due to the combination of 3 things. The wind shifted, the temperature outside dropped, and the water injection system kicked back in. And the good news is that with more power in the engines, the pilot successfully gains altitude. By 2:05, Migatis managed to turn left, avoiding a collision with Mount Aigaleo. The plane is heading towards the ocean. It keeps flying for over 30 minutes to dump fuel. The idea is to make the aircraft lighter before landing, as it's loaded with 160 tons of fuel needed for the transatlantic flight. After that, the captain brings the aircraft back to the same runway from which they took off, and they land safely at Alinicon Airport. Everyone on board is safe, not a scratch on them, all thanks to this pilot who bravely broke the rules to save his crew and passengers. Now, picture the wild applause on the ground, and Migatis' daughters eagerly waiting for their father as he exits the plane. And it's no small feat, this pilot did the unthinkable. To put it in perspective, every Boeing simulation of this same flight ended in a crash. Migatis' impressive achievement led Olympic Airways to modify some of its procedures, and Boeing began to include a review of this case in its training curriculum. Now, you might be thinking that Migatis was traumatized after this accident and never wanted to board an aircraft again. But nope. Remember, we're talking about a real hero. At 6 p.m. on that same day, Migatis took his seat in the cockpit of a replacement Boeing 747 and flew 400 passengers over the Atlantic to New York. As for the aircraft, it stuck around with Olympic Airways for a couple of years until it joined Trans World Airlines in 1985. This 747 Boeing's career ended in 1997 after 24 years of service.
It only takes a moment for a routine flight to turn into a gripping survival story. In a world where a wrong button or an unexpected gust of wind can lead to a disaster, adhering to safety rules is crucial for everyone, from buckling seatbelts to raising window shades during landing. We got all these rules learning from our mistakes. Stay tuned to find out more. A flight had a crazy mid-air moment in 1993 when the pilot accidentally deployed the wing slats, the part on the leading edge of the wing. Now, the weather was fine, passengers were relaxed, everyone was doing what they wanted. Suddenly, they felt an unexpected jolt. Instantly, the autopilot disengaged. The captain started wrestling with the controls. The plane became wonky, pitching and rolling dramatically, resulting in a rapid descent of 5,000 feet. The vibration threw the cabin into total chaos, with passengers screaming in fear. The slats were only to be used during takeoffs and landings, not in midair. It was China Eastern Airlines Flight 583, cruising over the Pacific on its way from Shanghai to Los Angeles. The pilot declared an emergency and directed the plane to an Air Force base in Alaska. Out of the 255 people on board, 60 ended up in a hospital, and sadly 2 didn't make it. The pilot made some quick moves to stabilize the aircraft, but the injuries happened because folks weren't buckled in. They reckoned that the slats deployed because of the design of the control handle. The company was to blame for that. They produced it in such a way that the handle could accidentally get jiggled while cruising. Luckily, the crew was trained, and the airliner itself was fine, except for the messed-up cabin. The aftermath of this incident was costly, requiring about $1.5 million to repair the damage. When the plane started to lose altitude, overhead lockers burst open, and the safety video played 3 times for an eerie touch. Once the aircraft steadied, flight attendants jumped into action, providing first aid, leaving empty kits scattered in the cabin. It turned out that the poorly designed slat control handle had caused 11 similar incidents before. The captain probably nudged it accidentally while fixing the speed controls. The lack of pilot training on high-altitude issues and the stall warning system made things worse. If the passengers had kept their seatbelts on, injuries would have been way less severe. This has been the case during many other accidents. You probably know this airplane announcement. Even when the seatbelt sign is off, buckle up when you're seated. Experts say it's a good call. While flying is safe, keeping that seatbelt on is smart because you might hit unexpected turbulence. It's about keeping you secure during that bumpy, jarring time, especially that sneaky one during stormy weather. Sarah Wilson, the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, thinks the seatbelt sign should be turned on throughout the entire journey. Predicting turbulence is like trying to guess the weather. It's not 100% accurate. Turbulence can happen anywhere. Aircraft are tough. They can handle really bad turbulence. The real risk is getting injured during turbulence, not planes falling apart. It's rare, but accidents still happen. In a dramatic episode in 2016, a pilot pulled off a superhero move, saving 439 lives. He was getting ready for takeoff in Shanghai. All of a sudden, another plane showed up on the runway in front of him. Reacting with lightning-fast speed, the pilot swiftly elevated his plane, narrowly avoiding a disaster. The pilot was awarded $360,000 for his remarkable skills. He missed the other plane by less than 67 feet, about the length of a semi-trailer truck. It turned out that the air traffic controllers and the landing crew had mixed things up. 2 controllers lost their licenses, and 13 others got in trouble. They say this incident was like a throwback to the Tenerife airport collision in 1977. Back then, 2 jumbo aircraft collided on a foggy runway. They didn't get lucky that time. The incident was a total disaster. Certain accidents in aviation history prevented others. With each crash, something crucial is upgraded. In 1956, 2 planes collided over the Grand Canyon, resulting in the tragic loss of 128 lives on board. This accident kick-started a $250 million air traffic control system enhancement. The Federal Aviation Agency also appeared in 1958 to keep an eye on air safety. Then, in 1986, a private plane accidentally entered the Los Angeles control area, colliding with another aircraft. This tragedy took 86 people's lives. In response, collision avoidance systems were introduced. In 1978, United Flight 173 faced a landing gear problem. This led to a crash that claimed 10 lives. This incident triggered a transformation in cockpit training, introducing cockpit resource management. This management method shifted away from the traditional captain-centric approach to emphasizing teamwork and communication among the crew. Another upgrade was about averting in-flight emergencies. In 1983, Air Canada Flight 797 had smoke in the rear lavatory, which led to an accident that took 23 lives. The FAA responded by requiring smoke detectors and automatic fire extinguishers in aircraft lavatories. Post-1998, planes got retrofitted with fire-blocking seat cushions and floor lighting, with newer ones adopting flame-resistant materials. Winds can be dangerous in certain circumstances. The crash of Delta Flight 191 in 1985 brought attention to the dangers of wind shear. Research efforts by NASA and the FAA led to the development of forward-looking radar wind shear detectors. By the mid-90s, these became standard on airliners. The number of wind shear-related accidents has reduced significantly since then. In 1985, United Airlines Flight 232 faced a nightmare when the DC-10's engine failure left it virtually uncontrollable. Pilot Alfred Haynes landed the plane at a nearby airport, but the subsequent fire was terrifying. 185 passengers survived the catastrophe. The root cause of the incident was a crack in the fan disc, which occurred during the manufacturing of the titanium alloy. This incident prompted the FAA to modify the hydraulic system, implement redundant safety systems in future aircraft, and revolutionize engine inspection protocols. In 1988, a big chunk of an Aloha flight's fuselage ripped off in mid-flight. In an instant, the cabin was torn open, leaving the passengers exposed to the open sky. Despite the chaos, the pilots managed a safe landing, with only one fatality. The NTSB found that corrosion and fatigue damage, which had accumulated over 89,000 flight cycles, had caused this accident. The plane had been used for short-hop pressurized flights between the Hawaiian Islands. Shortly after, the agency initiated the National Aging Aircraft Research Program in 1991. This program tightened inspection and maintenance standards, especially for high-use and high-cycle planes. About 80% of mishaps happen in the first 3 minutes after takeoff or the last 8 minutes before landing. Keep your eyes peeled during these times, and your survival chances will go up. Now, don't let that freak you out. The odds of actually getting into a plane crash are like 1 in 11 million. That's the same possibility as being struck by lightning in a given year in the United States. Planes, on the other hand, often get struck by lightning, but they're built to handle it. Each plane probably gets zapped about once every year or every 3,000 hours it's up in the sky. But there hasn't been a lightning-related accident since 1967. Engineers have ensured that when a plane gets hit, the lightning just zips right through it and out, without really messing up anything inside. Let's delve into the fascinating mechanics of how planes stay airborne. The wings are important, but it's not just about them. There are 4 forces at play: lift, thrust, drag, and weight. The little tails on the ends of wings are called winglets, and they help reduce air swirls, making the aircraft slicker and faster. There's a reason why lights dim when a plane lands at night. It prepares everyone for a quick evacuation, helping the eyes adjust to the dark should the landing go awry. You're in a bright room filled with obstacles, and suddenly the lights go out and you're asked to dash for the exit. Tricky. Flight attendants also ask you to raise those window shades during landing. In case of an emergency, they want you to be able to see what's outside and figure out if one side of the plane is better for a quick escape. If you're wondering where the safest spot in an airliner is, it's in the back. According to research conducted by Popular Mechanics, spanning from 1971 to 2005, sitting in the back gives you a 40% better shot at making it through an accident. Almost as importantly, you're closer to the restrooms.
Welcome on board. This is your captain speaking, and I have some information about our flight today. It was supposed to be a regular flight for a British Midland Airways Airbus 312 from Cyprus to Great Britain. It all happened on May 26, 2003. The last thing the 213 passengers and 8 crew members would expect was a hailstorm to attack their plane. Yet, it happened when they were approaching Manchester, England. The weather got really harsh, with huge hail and chunks of ice in the air. Passengers who chose not to buckle up were thrown from their seats. The plane dropped and started to vibrate. There was panic aboard. As the passengers remembered later, everyone was out of their seats for a few seconds and stuck on the ceiling. The pilot, who had 20 years of flying experience, had never been in a similar situation before, but did everything to save the plane and the passengers. They landed at Manchester Airport with a 30-minute delay. Everyone aboard was really happy and thanked the crew. They all survived without significant injuries. Airport services inspected the plane after landing. It turned out that the hail had damaged the Airbus's nose and the windshield a lot, but the internal systems were perfectly fine. Years later, in October 2022, a similar story happened to LATAM Airlines Paraguay's flight. It was carrying 48 passengers from Santiago de Chile to Asunción when a major hailstorm interrupted the plan. Passengers shared videos from the cabin, and it looked like a scary movie set. The plane was shaking badly, and the lightning flashed outside. Luckily, no one got injured, and the plane made a successful emergency landing in Brazil. Just like in the story of the British Airbus flight, the severe hail left a gaping hole in the aircraft's nose and shattered it. Just like in the hail is obviously really dangerous to planes. When it breaks the windshield, the pilots have to deal with rain and super strong winds. Hail dents the leading edges of the wings and tail, which means it decreases lift and makes the plane unaerodynamic. That's why it has to fly faster than usual to stay in the air. In extreme situations, hail can even make the engine flame out or severely disrupt plane systems and put flight safety at risk. Another natural phenomenon planes don't exactly love is a thunderstorm. Takeoff and landing are already the most dangerous parts of the flight, even in normal conditions, and a thunderstorm makes them much riskier. Microbursts, which thunderstorms bring along, can make the pilot lose control of the plane. If the storm catches the plane in midair, things aren't that bad. Modern aircrafts are designed to withstand bad weather conditions. Pilots can also climb to a safe altitude above the storm, or fly around it. To land or not to land directly in a thunderstorm depends on how severe it is. If it's a strong one with microbursts, the plane may slam into the ground at high speed because of a strong downdraft. They're loud and feisty, and they're the pilot's worst nightmare. I'm not talking about rowdy passengers here, but about volcanoes. On June 24, 1982, British Airways Flight 9 was on its way from London Heathrow to Auckland, with 5 stops on the way: Mumbai, Chennai, Kuala Lumpur, Perth, and Melbourne. Boeing 747 performing the flight made it to Kuala Lumpur uneventfully. Most passengers were exhausted by that time after all the traveling. The crew, though, were fresh and full of energy as they only got on board in Kuala Lumpur. The flying conditions were perfect, and everything promised an uneventful 5-hour flight. Once the plane reached its cruising height, the crew noticed weird fumes rising up from the vents at the floor level. Then, the pilots noticed a super intense St. Elmo's fire phenomenon right at their windshield. Normally, it's a harmless discharge of static electricity on a metal surface, and planes, as well as ships, experience it on a regular basis. But the weather radars weren't showing any thunderclouds whatsoever. They turned on the landing lights and saw a weird cloud surrounding the plane. They decided to continue the flight anyway, but the fumes now got to the passenger cabin. They were getting thicker and smelled like sulfur. And then, some window seat passengers noticed that the engines were bright blue with some lights shining through the fan blades. The temperature on board was rising. Then, engines flamed out one by one in a matter of minutes. The plane started gliding. The pilots decided to land it on the water of the Indian Ocean, as they knew they wouldn't have been able to cross the high mountains of the Java coastline and land there. The captain informed the passengers of what was going on. They remained calm despite the heartbreaking news. Landing on water like this would be extremely risky. But suddenly, the engines went back to life, one after another. The pilots managed to get back to normal flight altitude, but one of the engines failed again, and the crew decided to land at the nearest airport. When they approached it, the pilots couldn't see anything, as the windshield looked as though it had been sandblasted. The landing equipment failed, and they had to land the aircraft manually. Despite all this, it all went well, and everyone on board was safe and sound. Later, it turned out that they had to go through this ordeal because they flew into a cloud of volcanic ash, left after the eruption of Mount Galagun. The ash was dry, and that's why no weather radars could detect it. This ash cloud clogged the engines and scraped the windshield. As the ash entered the combustion chambers, it melted and stuck to their insides. And that's how the engines shut down. When the plane left the ash cloud, the engines cooled down. The molten ash became solid, broke off, and the pilots managed to restart them. This story is great proof of how volcanic ash clouds are a huge danger to aviation. Pilots should avoid it by all means because those clouds, which are hard to tell from ordinary ones, reduce visibility, damage flight controls, and cause jet engines to fail. Planes sometimes get delayed or even canceled when it's too cold outside. If the cold comes with a blizzard, flight control may command the aircraft to stay on the ground and wait until the snowstorm subsides. Ice on the runway is no good either. The landing gear of an aircraft is nothing like a car's wheels, and you can't put studs on them to avoid skidding. Plus, a plane needs to develop speeds on the ground that are much higher than on an average road to take off successfully. If the runway is slippery with ice, the airplane can slide off it easily. The same goes for landing, which is even trickier in freezing conditions because a plane is in a much less controlled environment and is moving at even greater speeds. In 2015, a Delta Airlines flight landed at New York's LaGuardia Airport during a snowstorm and veered out of control. The airport's runway 13 is tricky for pilots even in good weather as it partially extends over the water. Luckily, the plane that skidded off the icy runway stopped moments before ending up in the bay. No one aboard was seriously injured. Freezing weather conditions can also cause frost and ice sheets to build up on the plane itself. Even a thin crust of ice over the wings of a plane can mess with their delicate design and destroy lift. Planes can be de-iced though. The airport staff usually spray them with a special solution that doesn't let the ice build up on the aircraft's skin. Jet fuel and the equipment that pumps it can freeze too if the temperature is too low. The fuel freezes at -40 degrees Fahrenheit, but that can only happen on the ground before takeoff. At a cruising altitude, temperatures may drop as low as -70 degrees Fahrenheit. But since the liquid is inside the plane and burning down steadily, it's much warmer there. On the ground though, nothing stops the fuel from turning into ice. If that happens, the plane won't go anywhere, of course. You may take a look through the window when in the sky and see the engines right under the wing. The thought may go through your head something like, "Oh, how fascinating. That little thing is what keeps us in the air at 37,000 feet. And after that, you go back to your movie, book, or iPad. Sure, it's cool, but we kind of expect it to work. Take it for granted, and don't pay much attention to it. And at the same time, there's so much work going on behind the scenes. Fasten your seatbelts. Today, we're going to find out what it takes for a plane engine to be ready to go. Before you set foot on a plane, or before its engine even starts operating, it must undergo many tests to prove it's safe. In one test, for example, they shoot water in the engine at very high pressure. Most engines change through time. Engineers tend to always build something new, improve some features, and generally upgrade engines to make sure they work the best they can. This part is certainly fun, or at least it is until the engine meets Mother Nature. To make sure it will remain efficient, experts need to create an engine that will be able to withstand insane storms, rain, ice, snow, extreme heat, and so much more. An engine needs to be ready for all that even before it gets into production. Engines can take enormous amounts of water. There are special tests for water ingestion. During such a test, a team forces a stream of water into a running engine. What's amazing is that they shoot nearly 800 gallons of water per single minute directly into it. These tests confirm you'll be safe on the plane, even during a heavy rain or insanely powerful storm. If the engine is designed properly and meets safety standards, the water will come out without damaging it. Moving on. When the temperatures are really low and the weather gets colder, everything gets icy. And that can damage an engine and cause big problems for a plane. Such tests are especially tricky. Experts need to fire all kinds of ice particles into a running engine because you never know what you'll stumble upon up there in the air. By particles, I mean enormous balls of ice they throw into the engine. Not only do they want to see if the engine can take all that ice, but they also need to figure out how quickly it can recover after this. Hot and cold tests are fun too. To test if the engine is going to work in extreme heat, manufacturers will run it at maximum temperature and keep it like that for an extended period of time. During the flight, temperatures might get extremely high, but also very, very low. And when you want to test an engine in freezing temperatures, you need to go to a place where you'll have such conditions. For example, Canada's Arctic area of Nunavut. But dress well, because temperatures over there are not pleasant. They go down to -18 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, you leave the engine there for a week to test it both in the air and on the ground. You know how cool it is to watch through the window as the plane's going up? Well, the reason it can even lift off the ground is these rotating blades. They're the most important part as they move at speeds of nearly 3,000 revolutions per minute. The engine reaches full thrust as they rotate. These blades just have to be secure, but things happen, so one of the blades might still fall off. That's why tests are an essential part of the process. You can see if some of the blades are not attached firmly enough and fix it, so there's no chance they break off, especially while the plane is flying. If a blade falls off, it might hit other moving parts. It has happened in the past with some planes, so now tests are very strict. They allow specialists to understand if blades are set well before they get attached to the plane. During the test, engineers put a small explosive at the base of one of those blades. At the moment when someone starts the engine, bam! Oh wow, that's how you see if the blade will stay inside the chamber of the engine. If it breaks off, the team goes back to the drawing stage. They know they need to redesign it and repeat the test. Even if a blade is as small as your finger, it can cause lots of trouble to the engine and, by that, the entire airplane. Speaking of blades, have you noticed those little white spirals you can see here in the center of an engine? They look cool, but they're definitely more than that. They're primarily there for the safety of the crew on the ground. Crew members usually can't hear it when the engine is running because they're mostly wearing hearing protection. Thanks to these spirals, they can see when the engines are on, so they can stay at a safe distance. Another reason why they might be important, although this hasn't been proven yet, is that they scare away birds when they're in the air and prevent them from getting up too close to the plane's engines. So you're up there in the air, relaxing and reading your favorite book that keeps you calm. You're not a fan of flying, especially... Oh no, the captain's speaking, saying you might go through some turbulence because you just got caught in the middle of a storm. He says there's nothing to be afraid of. It's normal, even though the chances of lightning hitting your plane are very high at such altitudes. An average commercial airplane gets struck by lightning approximately once a year, and it can be very tricky to deal with this. In the past, some planes experienced that and even had to make an emergency landing. So, engineers needed to create a test to make sure a lightning strike wouldn't shut the engine down. They use lighter materials, like carbon fiber. These materials don't conduct electricity well, so they end up in both engines and the basic structure of the plane. Manufacturers also add a layer of foil or metal mesh, which makes the airplane even more protected from lightning strikes. So, when the captain asks you not to worry, it's not about giving false hopes or anything like that. With the existing system, you most likely won't even feel when lightning hits your plane. There are 3 stages of testing a finished airplane. During the first one, you check the system without the engine running. During the second one, the engine is running while mounted on a special stand. And the ultimate stage, and kind of best part, where you want to check if everything works right, is the in-flight test. You put the engine in a couple of different situations. Once the plane is in the air, the engine needs to show it can produce thrust. Remember those blades? It takes approximately 2 years to build an engine and set it for testing. Tests seem like something you can do within a short time, but in reality, this process can last for up to 5 years for a single model. When manufacturers launch a new design, they will use the first engine they built just for testing. That means that this particular model will never fly commercially. There are many, many more tests there, of course, like wing flex testing, for example. Wings flex during turbulence. This is the reason you have a smoother ride. They test wing flex to nearly 150% of the maximum flex a plane will experience during a regular flight. Then, there's an acceleration test. Different parts of a plane go through really big stress and pressure throughout the flight. Just picture racing down the runway for takeoff and then having to suddenly stop the flight and the plane itself. Acceleration tests basically apply strong forces to the components, or even the whole frame of an aircraft, just to make sure it will withstand all that stress.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the pilot of your plane speaking. Please fasten your seatbelts and stay calm. Don't worry, everything's fine. We're just falling! Ah! Okay, don't panic. Yes, we're falling, but the landing is gonna be great. And do you know why?
Because this is a video about the most incredible landings with happy endings. So, imagine this situation. You're in a giant passenger Boeing. The plane is flying from Montreal to Edmonton at an altitude of tens of thousands of feet. Weather is good. There's no turbulence. But then, you notice a strange silence. You don't understand what's happening. Exactly. The sound of engines is gone. And do you know why? Because they stopped working right in the air. The plane has run out of fuel. It'll take you a couple of minutes to get to the nearest gas station, if you fly straight down. It's a real accident that happened on July 23, 1983. That flight got nicknamed the Gimli Glider. During the fueling of the aircraft, the crew confused the measurements. They thought they were pouring American gallons, when it was actually liters. The pilots realized the mistake when they were already in the sky when the fuel had run out. They didn't panic and put the aircraft into the optimal mode to increase its flight range. One of them knew that the Gimli Air Force Base was nearby. There was a small runway there. At that moment, it was filled with some garbage and carts. The pilot contacted the base and warned them about the emergency landing. The employees of the base cleared the runway in a matter of minutes. The plane began to land very smoothly. The pilots controlled the aircraft by using its wings. They needed the last drops of fuel to brake with the help of turbines. When the plane touched down, the front landing gear broke. The landing was tough. The whole plane was shaking, and the passengers were terrified. But everything ended well. No one got hurt. On November 1st, 2011, a Polish Airlines 767 passenger plane was flying from the USA to Warsaw. 30 minutes after taking off, the pilots suddenly realized the landing gear didn't work. They warned the passengers about it. The wheels didn't come out because of some hydraulic error. Pilots remained calm and continued the flight. They almost reached the final destination and made several more attempts to deploy the landing gear. Nothing worked. They realized they would have to make a hard landing. When any airplane lands at this speed without wheels, it releases a lot of sparks, and its body heats up because of friction with the ground. In this case, the chance of a fuel tank fire is high. That's why the pilots had to circle around the airport for about an hour to burn fuel. Then, when the tank was almost empty, they started landing without the landing gear. There were sparks, metal grinding against the runway, the cabin shaking. The lower part of the fuselage turned red because of the high temperature. After sliding for a while, the plane stopped. About 231 people on board were rescued, thanks to the pilot's professionalism. Probably one of the most famous emergency landings occurred on the Hudson River on January 15, 2009. Pilot Chesley Sullenberger became a hero that day. The plane he was flying collided with a flock of geese during its departure from New York. The engines were out of order. There was only icy water under the aircraft and almost no chance of salvation. Even now, experts say that the risk of crashing the plane was very high, but experienced Chesley Sullenberger knew what to do. He did his best to calm down, focused on his work, calculated the exact angle at which the plane needed to touch the water, and successfully landed the aircraft. If he had made the slightest mistake, the plane would have lost its wings and drowned almost immediately. Chesley Sullenberger saved the lives of 155 people and became a celebrity. There was one dangerous situation in the sky on June 10, 1990. not for passengers, but for the pilot. Flight 5390 British Airways took off from England and headed for Spain. It was gaining altitude, and the flight attendants started serving food to the passengers. At that moment, the pilots heard some noise. Condensate began to fill the cabin. Then, the glass on the side of the captain flew out of the window frame. He was pulled halfway out of the cabin because of decompression. His knees got stuck in the control panel next to his seat. The first officer grabbed him tightly by the belt. The temperatures were extremely low, and an incredibly strong wind was blowing outside. The plane began to descend, gaining speed. The autopilot shut down. The flight attendants grabbed the captain so that the co-pilot could operate the controls with both hands. The oxygen level was decreasing, so he began an emergency landing. The captain was outside the plane for about 20 minutes, and despite the extreme conditions, he survived. The plane landed successfully. The captain was taken to the hospital, and the glass was replaced. Further investigation revealed that the window had flown out because the bolts used there had been wrong. A plane runs out of gasoline. The engines stall. An aircraft crashes into a flock of birds. That's all pretty scary stuff. But what if a plane broke in half? This really happened in April 2022. A DHL Boeing 757-200 cargo plane was picking up speed on the runway. It was going to fly to Guatemala. The aircraft took off, and the pilots noticed some malfunction in the hydraulic system. They didn't fly far away, so they asked the dispatchers to allow them to land. The plane turned around and began to descend, and at that moment, its tail just broke off. The plane ran off the runway. Its hull was hot, but firefighters poured anti-fire foam on it just in time. Fortunately, none of the crew members got hurt. What caused such an accident is unknown. The company launched an internal investigation. The next hard landing occurred in the 40s. The pilot and 2 crew members were flying over Papua New Guinea. Visibility was poor because of fog and rain. But, according to the pilot's calculations, they were flying above a wheat field. He began to lower the plane. The clouds cleared, and he saw not a field, but a swampy area. They had no choice but to make a hard landing. It was a success, kind of. All 3 crew members survived, but the plane got bogged down in a swamp. It was impossible to take off, so the crew went to look for the nearest settlement. For 2 days, they were walking through the swamps, sharp tall grass, and hordes of mosquitoes. Exhausted, they reached dry land and met one of the locals. They helped the crew, took them to the village, and provided medical help. The plane was left to rot in the swamp, forgotten. It stayed there for about 30 years. Its whole body got covered with grass, mud, and moss. And the cabin was moldy. The locals loved to climb inside and play with it. Then, in the 70s, some tourists from Austria accidentally found the aircraft. They took a photo of the plane and published it in the local newspaper. It attracted the attention of many photographers and travelers from all over the world. They called the plane the Swamp Ghost. Many tourists visited it and took parts of the plane as souvenirs. In 2016, one American traveler pulled it out of the swamp and moved it to his home.
Is the sky like a desert? Can a commercial aircraft fly faster than the speed of sound? Can you fix a plane with a piece of tape? Let's check your intuition with this cool truth or myth airplane quiz. Make sure to note down your correct answers and share your score in the comments. So, the first one for you. Commercial airplanes are more fuel efficient than your car. True or false? That's actually true. Commercial flights have been more fuel efficient per person per mile than cars for more than a decade. Better technologies and a larger number of people that fit in one plane have decreased the energy intensity of traveling by air by almost 74%. As for cars, it's been just a 57% drop. Okay, how about this one? There's no row 13 on a plane. Well, come to think of it, I've never seen a 13A or any other letter on my boarding pass. What about you? That's true, but only partially. In those countries where the number 13 is considered unlucky, there's really no row 13. But in other countries, the missing number may differ depending on what is believed to bring bad luck there. Opening a plane door during the flight is a real safety risk. It sounds kinda terrifying to me, but is it true? You can relax, that's just a myth. For one thing, the doors are locked, but even if they weren't, no one can open the door of a flying plane. It's physically impossible. The cabin pressure won't allow anybody to do it. When an airplane is at cruising altitude, it's pressurized. The difference between the inside and outside is huge. In other words, the pressure inside the cabin pushes on the door and doesn't allow anyone to open it from the inside. Even better, the airplane door is called a plug door. Its inner edge is wider than the outer. That's why it acts like a bathtub drain stopper, corking the doorway without falling through. Your skin is drier on a plane than it would be in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Can you believe this? And if you think this is true, you're absolutely right. The airplane cabin is pressurized, and the humidity there is set to 20%. For comparison, in the Sahara Desert, the average air humidity is around 25%, and your skin is used to at least 40% of humidity. That's why your nose and throat feel so dry when you're flying. Several years ago, someone posted a photo on the internet that became viral in no time. In this image, there was an airline technician, and he seemed to be fixing a plane with duct tape. So the question is, could it be true? Or was it just a fake? The answer isn't so simple. It wasn't your regular duct tape, so partially, this fact is a myth. But it was some kind of tape, known as speed tape. It costs around $700 per roll. It's actually an aluminum adhesive you can use to temporarily mend minor damage, until you can repair it properly. Is it true that pilots avoid the Bermuda Triangle? After all, it has such a notorious reputation. Ships and planes simply disappear into thin air in this region. This one is certainly a myth. Today, people already know that there's no particular danger in the Bermuda Triangle, and planes fly over this area as usual. Airplanes mostly fly on their own, with autopilots doing all the work. Myth or truth? What's your bet? It's a widespread myth. Many people are sure that planes are some super automated mechanisms that can fly mostly by themselves, and pilots are there simply for backup. In reality, though, flying is a hands-on job. It needs constant attention and a skilled flight crew. There once was a plane that flew twice faster than the speed of sound. Can it be true, or is it too far-fetched? This fact is definitely not a myth. The Concorde could reach a speed of 1,330 miles per hour. That's much faster than the speed of sound, which is around 767 miles per hour. And that's indeed almost twice as slow as the Concorde. You might have heard this scary fact before. Planes empty toilets right in the air. Sounds alarming, but is it true? Fortunately, that's only a myth. There's absolutely nothing to this legend. Airplane toilets use a vacuum-based system to transport all the contents out of the bowl and into a special tank. It's located in the rear part of the aircraft, and this tank gets emptied only on the ground. This is a tricky one. When a plane is flying towards the east, it can reach higher speeds. So, can the speed really depend on the direction? And this is true. It's possible thanks to high-altitude winds, known as jet streams. They blow at a speed of 100 to 300 miles per hour, and since our planet rotates from west to east, aircraft moving in the same direction can use these winds to move faster. Do you think pilots can control airflow to keep passengers sleepy and relaxed and save on fuel? This one is definitely a myth. If you ask a pilot this question, you might hear "ridiculous" in reply. The truth is that pressurization determines the oxygen level in the cabin. How about this one? The world's tallest air traffic control tower is as high as a skyscraper. Can it be true, or is it just an impressive myth? I know it's hard to believe, but it's actually true. When an airplane lands, it needs the assistance of runway lights and airport beacons. It's part of the responsibilities of the air traffic control tower. It also manages ground traffic. No wonder such construction needs to be extra tall. The new Bangkok International Airport in Thailand has a 430-foot tall tower. Its height is almost the same as the height of a 40-story building. It cost $18 million to build the tower. I've got another tough one for you. The sensitivity of your taste buds dropped by 30% during the flight. Yes or no? This is true. The pressure in the cabin combined with the dryness of the air kinda numbs your taste buds. But the most curious thing here is that this mostly affects salty and sweet flavors. If you're served something spicy or bitter, you can still taste it as usual. Airline caterers try to take the decreased sensitivity of your taste buds into account while preparing airplane meals. They have to modify lots of good old recipes to make your food taste better. As soon as your oxygen mask is on, in case the cabin is depressurized, you can relax and breathe out. You can still use it till the end of the flight. I wish it was true, but is it? Sadly, it's a myth. Passenger oxygen masks usually provide enough air to breathe normally for 10 to 15 minutes. In other words, it's just a temporary solution. But in most cases, this time is enough for the plane to go down to the altitude of 10,000 feet. That's where people can breathe without using oxygen masks. And since planes descend very fast, the need for additional oxygen lasts for a few minutes at most. By the way, the oxygen system gets tested regularly during special maintenance checks. Plus, both passengers and pilots' oxygen flow doesn't depend on electricity. Masks use individual oxygen generators, so even if there's some electrical problem on board, the oxygen doesn't get cut off. Many people say that the plane is the safest means of travel, but do you believe in it? That's a myth. Flying is the second safest. Studies show that the elevator is safer. Unfortunately, it won't be able to take you to the Bahamas. Okay, this last one was kind of a joke. Statistically, planes are indeed the safest way to get to your destination. So, how many correct answers did you have? Tell me in the comments below. Me, 8. Duh.
The plane had been in the air for a mere 25 seconds when the pilots noticed weird noises and bizarre vibrations. They tried several ways to improve the situation, but nothing worked. The engine surges continued, and just over a minute into the flight, when the plane reached 3,000 feet, both engines failed. First the right one, 2 seconds later the left one. The pilots decided to return to the airport they had just left. At the same time, they tried to restart the engines. Nothing seemed to work. The flight crew made a decision to pitch the plane down and then level it off. Perhaps it could help them gain some speed for the glide. But soon, they realized they wouldn't make it to the airport. Was the plane going to crash? That's when the miracle at Gotrura occurred. The morning before the flight started as usual. Regular pre-flight procedures, good weather. The members of the flight crew were experienced pilots. A 44-year-old Danish captain with over 8,000 flight hours under his belt, and a 34-year-old first officer from Sweden with 3,000 hours. So, what could go wrong? The plane itself was almost brand new. It was a McDonnell Douglas MD-81 nicknamed Dana Viking. It made its first flight on March 16, 1991. By that fateful day, the aircraft had been in service for a mere 9 months. There were 122 passengers and 7 crew members on board. Flight 751 Scandinavian Airlines was a scheduled flight from Stockholm, Sweden to Warsaw, Poland. On the way, the plane was supposed to make a stop in Copenhagen, Denmark. The aircraft took off from Stockholm according to its schedule at 8:47 a.m. local time. But by that point, the people inside had already been doomed, all because of a terrible sequence of events before the departure. It started the night before. The plane arrived at Stockholm Airport after a flight from Zurich. It was 10:09 p.m. The aircraft spent the night at the gate outside. It was cold. The temperature dropped to 34 degrees Fahrenheit, just above freezing. What made the situation even worse was that almost 6,000 pounds of freezing cold fuel, chilled during the night, still remained in the tanks located in the wings. The fuel was so cold because the plane had been flying at the cruising altitude, where the air temperature outside the cabin varied from -61 to -80 degrees. The flight from Zurich lasted around 1 hour and 40 minutes. Soon after midnight, a flight technician came to check on the aircraft. The man had to remove some slush from the landing gear, otherwise he wouldn't be able to examine it. At around 2 a.m., when he was leaving, he noticed some ice covering the upper part of the wings. By the morning, the situation had become even dire. A layer of clear, almost invisible ice had formed on the tops of the wings. The plane had to leave the gate at around 8:30 a.m. An hour before the departure, the mechanic responsible for the plane noticed that some ice covered the underside of the wings. He decided to make sure there was no ice on the tops of the wings. He climbed a ladder and put one knee on the wing. Then he bent forward to touch the front part of the wing. There was no ice, just some slush. The mechanic decided to make sure everything was fine with the air inlet of one of the engines. He didn't find anything abnormal. Soon after that, the personnel used more than 220 gallons of de-icing fuel to remove ice from the plane. The mechanic consulted with the captain of the aircraft and ordered the staff to de-ice the underside of the wings as well. After all, he had seen some ice there. But no one thought to double-check if there was clear ice on the tops of the wings. After they had finished the procedure, the mechanic reported to the captain, "We're done here. De-icing finished. There was a lot of snow and ice, but everything's clear now." The captain thanked the mechanic and carried on with the pre-flight procedures. The plane taxied to the runway. Its engine's anti-ice systems were switched on and didn't show any malfunction. But several passengers later claimed they had seen ice sliding off the upper side of the wings while the plane had been taking off. And still, the plane left the ground and headed for Stockholm as usual. But shortly after the takeoff, several pieces of the overlooked ice broke off. At full speed, they slammed into the fans of the engines near the tail on both sides of the plane, ruining the blades. It led to a series of surges, and the rest is history. Meanwhile, somewhere in the cabin, Scandinavian Airlines flight captain Per Holmberg, who was on board as a passenger, noticed something was amiss. At first, he informed the flight attendant sitting in the rear jump seat that the right engine was surging. She tried to contact the flight crew, unsuccessfully. Then, the ununiformed captain rushed to the cockpit and asked if he could help the pilots. The first officer gave him the emergency checklist, and the captain asked him to start the auxiliary power unit, a small gas turbine in the tail of the plane. Holmberg's advice and help were invaluable, but was it enough to save the plane and the people inside? When the plane emerged from the cloud cover at an altitude of 890 feet, the pilots realized they wouldn't have enough time to make it back to the airport. An immediate emergency landing was unavoidable. The assisting captain passed the order to the cabin crew, and they started preparing the passengers. There was a large field to the north of the plane, but the captain realized they didn't have enough time to reach it. So he chose a much smaller field in a forested area in the direction of flight. It was not far from the village of Gotrura in Uppland, Sweden. The plane was just 1,300 feet above the ground when the assisting captain started extending the flaps. At a height of 183 feet, the captain reported to Stockholm Control, "We're crashing to the ground." 7 seconds later, the plane hit several trees and lost a huge chunk of its right wing. By that time, the landing gear had already been extended and the speed had decreased to 139 miles per hour. Moments later, the plane's tail struck the ground and broke off. The aircraft kept sliding across the field, still at high speed. It traveled 360 feet, with its main landing gear leaving marks on the field. At one point, the plane lost the main and nose landing gear. Its fuselage broke into 3 parts. Miraculously, there was no fire. If you look at the pictures from the crash site, the plane torn into pieces with its parts scattered across the field, it's hard to believe that all 129 people on board the plane survived. It seems like a miracle, but it was also thanks to the flight attendants' quick reaction and the correct instructions they gave the passengers. They didn't panic and told the people to adopt the brace position just in time to avoid fatalities. Even more surprising, almost all passengers, except for 4 people, made their way out of the plane on their own. No wonder this accident was nicknamed the Miracle. The aircraft, though, wasn't as lucky. The 9-month-old plane was damaged so badly that it was an immediate write-off. Everyone praised the actions of the flight crew. The landing was incredibly skilled, especially in such a fast-developing, very dangerous situation. The captain himself admitted that few pilots were ever forced to put to the test the skills they got during training, at least not to this degree. He said he was proud of his crew and relieved that everyone had survived, and he never returned to piloting commercial planes. Oh boy, you take your seat on the plane and look around. It's a large aircraft, spacious and new. You look up. Something draws your attention to that small compartment above your seat that contains your oxygen mask. Come to think of it, you've only ever seen it during the in-flight safety demonstrations. Maybe it's for the better, you think, and relax into your seat. Screaming and powerful jerks are what wake you up. One of the flight attendants is saying something in an urgent voice, but still disoriented after your nap, you can't catch the meaning of the announcement. And then, right in front of your face, you see an oxygen mask. Uh-oh. You place the mask over your face. You did pay attention to the safety demonstration, Then you grip the armrest and close your eyes, trying to calm down, however impossible it sounds. But do you know what's going on inside your oxygen mask? Well, let's talk about it. An oxygen mask deploys automatically in case of loss of cabin pressure. It might happen for several reasons. For example, some problems with the fuselage or malfunctioning of the valves pumping air into the plane. But most of these incidents aren't life-threatening if the masks deploy as they're supposed to. The problem with the air above 10,000 feet is that it contains too little oxygen for people to breathe. That's why once a plane rises higher than that altitude, the pressurization system springs into action. Its main task is to create the same breathable conditions as at the height of 5,000 to 8,000 feet. Now, if, for some reason, this system fails, oxygen masks drop. If this happens, it's crucial to put your mask on within the first 18 seconds after it deploys. If you procrastinate, you'll feel the effects of hypoxia, low oxygen levels in your blood, very fast. You'll become drowsy, and if you keep ignoring your oxygen mask, you're likely to pass out. Anyway, you acted fast and can now breathe freely. But for how long? And is it really oxygen that you inhale? Well, first of all, you notice with horror that your mask doesn't inflate. No worries, it shouldn't. It's supposed to rise and fall along with your breathing. So everything functions perfectly fine, even if it might seem it's not working. Now, hold on to your hats, here's shocking news. There isn't actually any oxygen in the mask. Instead of the gas, there are several chemicals. When they combine, they mimic good old breathable oxygen. The main reason for using the chemicals is safety issues. This mixture is way less combustible than oxygen tanks. Anyway, the chemical reaction that is happening in a deployed oxygen mask is the reason why you might smell something burning when putting it on. That's the chemicals mixing and forming the new substance. In case of a real fire, your mask simply won't drop. The chemicals inside can, unfortunately, fuel the flames. Oh, and don't forget that in your mask, there's only enough oxygen for 20 minutes at the most. This time is usually enough for the plane to get down to the necessary altitude. When the chemicals in the mask are all used up, the mask stops the flow of air. But by that time, you're already at an altitude where you can breathe without additional help. By the way, oxygen masks are not used too often. On U.S. airlines, it's only been 2,800 cases over a period of 40 years. In other words, additional oxygen was necessary a mere 10 times per 1 billion flight hours. The average cruising altitude of a commercial aircraft is 31,000 to 38,000 feet. Why can't planes climb higher than that? Well, it's not that they can't, they simply don't. Because pilots can't count that high. No, not really. It's because if they did go higher, there would be serious safety issues. First of all, if a plane is flying very high, it takes much more time to get back to a safe altitude. During an emergency, like rapid decompression, when every second counts, it can become a serious issue. Plus, while traveling at altitudes higher than 38,000 feet, planes can't communicate with the ground services as well as they do when flying lower. At lower altitudes, planes can also partially rely on wind, and if they rise too high without any additional support, they waste too much fuel to stay in the air. Once a plane climbs too high, the air can't provide enough lift to keep the machine going. The lift is created by the difference in air pressure, but at high altitudes, this difference is simply not enough. Air may not look like something real because it's nothing material, like metal or plastic. And still, it's one of the things that keeps planes aloft. Let's say a plane is heading for space. Ooh! It has large, cleverly designed wings and super powerful engines. But the higher it goes, the thinner the air becomes until there's hardly any air left. And then nothing can support the plane and help it go further if there is a near vacuum around. That's why we still need rockets to get to space. But back to your flight. The plane is now at a safe altitude and you don't need your oxygen mask anymore. But one interesting detail gets you thinking. Throughout the entire ordeal, you didn't hear the pilots mention the details of the emergency even once. Well, that's because pilots are always very careful with what and how they say. They'll never announce anything dramatic like fail or malfunction. They downplay any existing problem by replacing zero visibility with some fog. Something is broken with some technical problems, and so on. It's called positive scripting. Hey, looks like we've just jettisoned both our wings. Well, that should help us save on weight. Flight attendants are supposed to follow it as well, but passengers perceive pilots' announcements as more important and statistically listen to them attentively 100% of the time. At the same time, if there's a really serious problem you need to be prepared for, you'll definitely get informed. Now, picture this. You enter the passenger cabin of a spacious airplane, and as soon as you find your seat, you realize that for the next several hours, you're going to be crammed in the middle seat between two other human beings. But oh, look! There is a perfectly empty row of seats at the end of the plane. Time to switch places. But what you need to keep in mind is that by doing so, you might endanger the safety of the whole plane. Really? First of all, you aren't likely to be the only person willing to change your seat. But if a couple of passengers do it, they might upset the balance of the aircraft. And since most planes are extremely sensitive to any changes in their center of gravity, it can lead to very unpleasant consequences. Positive scripting again. Pilots must know the distribution of weight on the plane during the takeoff to make special calculations. If these calculations are wrong, there are chances that the aircraft will crash once it tries to leave the ground. Oops. But even if the worst doesn't happen, pilots can still have serious problems with controlling the plane. For example, one pilot almost didn't manage to turn the plane after just 4 passengers had left their assigned seats and moved to the front of the cabin. The situation was critical because the runway was unusually short, and if something had gone wrong, the plane wouldn't have been able to stop. It can also mess with the plane's balance if the airport staff load baggage incorrectly, for example, in the rear compartment instead of the front one. In this case, the machine can pitch up too fast, and the pilot will have a hard time trying not to lose speed. Now, that doesn't mean you can't change your seat on the plane at all, but before doing that, ask a cabin crew member if you're allowed to. Still shaky after the fright you've just had, you try to distract yourself. Luckily, you have a window seat and can watch the clouds and wait, you suddenly notice the way the airplane wings are flexing. They seem to flap so much that you get worried they're going to fall off. No worries. The wings are supposed to flex. They're designed this way. If they were stiff, they would snap off as soon as the lightest turbulence hit the plane. By the way, pilots recommend that nervous flyers who are afraid of turbulence should pick seats in the middle of the cabin. Turbulence affects the front and rear parts of the cabin the most. The middle, over the wing section, doesn't shake that much. Maybe you'll feel a bit calmer if you know that airplanes can safely operate with one engine, even during takeoff and landing. And both engines failing at the same time is almost unheard of. But even if something like this happens, a plane won't drop from the sky like a rock. If both engines stop working at a high altitude, pilots still have at least 20 minutes to find a place to land. A plane can land even if its wheels are broken. It does sound scary, but if the landing gear gets stuck, pilots just skid the plane's belly down on the runway. If everything's done correctly, such landings are more or less safe. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to land in our destination, more or less.
When it's too cold outside, airplanes often get delayed, or in extreme cases, even cancelled altogether. First of all, if it snows heavily, such conditions drastically decrease visibility, making it unsafe to taxi and take off. During a blizzard, flight control may command the aircraft to stay on the ground and wait until the snowstorm subsides. Ice on the runway is another reason. An airplane's landing gear are nothing like a car's wheels, and they can't be equipped with studs to avoid skidding. But even if they were, a plane needs to develop speeds on the ground that are much higher than on an average road to take off successfully. If the runway is slippery with ice, the airplane can slide off it easily. Things like this actually happened in the past. For example, in January 2014, the JFK airport in New York was shut down after a plane skidded off the runway and into the snow. Luckily, no one was injured, but the airport staff had to dig the aircraft out of the snow, and even the local police joined the efforts. Same story with landing, which is even trickier in freezing conditions because a plane is in much less of a controlled environment and traveling at even greater speeds. What's more, while an airplane that's about to take off and skidding will probably get into an open area and stop there, one that's about to land could end up crashing into the airport's infrastructure. Needless to say, that's way more dangerous for everyone. Freezing weather conditions can also cause frost and ice sheets to build up on the plane itself. Airplanes are carefully engineered, and any tampering with their structure may cause huge trouble. As experienced pilots say, even a thin crust of ice over the wings of a plane can mess with their delicate design and destroy lift. Planes can be de-iced though. The airport staff usually spray them with a special solution that doesn't let the ice build up on the aircraft's skin. But back to the runway. If it's covered with ice, there's little you can do. Unless the sun is shining, the chances of safely removing the ice from the pavement are almost zero. There's also a chance of damaging the pavement, making potholes, which can result in safety concerns for both takeoff and landing. Imagine driving over a pothole in a car at full speed. Pretty unpleasant. And now multiply it by about 1,000, because a plane is much heavier than a car, and don't forget that the landing gear is not exactly there for driving. Jet fuel and the equipment that pumps it can freeze too if the temperature is too low. The fuel freezes at -40 degrees Fahrenheit, but that can only happen on the ground before takeoff. At a cruising altitude, temperatures may drop as low as -70 degrees Fahrenheit, but since the liquid is inside the plane and burning down steadily, it's much warmer there. On the ground though, nothing stops the fuel from turning into ice. If that happens, no flights are available, obviously. Same goes for the pumping equipment. Even if the fuel is still liquid, the pump may cover with ice and just stop delivering the fuel into the plane's tanks. In the worst case scenario, it might even break down, leading to expensive repairs and prolonged delays in flights. Finally, ground crews have to do a lot of work before takeoff or landing, and they're all human after all, so they can't bear the freezing cold for too long. This issue is often resolved by tag teaming. One group of workers goes out in the field to do the job, while the other is waiting for them in a shelter. After 20 minutes or so, the first group returns to warm up, and the second one takes up the job where the first one left it. Although it's efficient, it still slows down the operations a lot, so that might also cause delays. But despite all the trouble freezing weather can cause, it's actually more beneficial for a plane than extreme heat. Cold air is denser than hot, so planes gain more lift and stay truer while in the air. They're more easily controlled in flight too. Air molecules are slower and closer together, creating a steady flow of air around the wings and cockpit. At high altitudes, the air naturally becomes thinner as the air molecules spread out and become more scarce. That's exactly why planes can't get to the upper layers of the atmosphere. There's just not enough air there to create sufficient lift. The same happens when it's too hot down on the ground though. Air molecules get faster and spread out, meaning the plane's wings don't have as much air to push off and get into the flight mode. To take off in extreme heat, a plane has to move much faster to generate enough air resistance and lift. But to move faster, the plane needs its engines to work better, and that's also impossible when it's too hot. As the air gets thinner, the amount of oxygen decreases too. And jet engines use oxygen in the atmosphere for combustion. When they lack this crucial element, they can't convert enough energy into thrust, meaning slower acceleration and worse energy output overall. So the problem is that the plane has to have a longer runway distance to build up enough speed and lift to take off. But it can't because its engines are not working to the best of their ability. This usually doesn't cause trouble, but only up to a point. When the temperatures on the ground level reaches about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, some flights can get cancelled because it's simply dangerous for them to try and take off. Other planes are more heat resistant and powerful, but that also depends on the heat. Some aircraft even have to reduce their weight by removing part of their fuel, cargo, or even passengers when it's too hot. Lighter load means better acceleration before takeoff, and it doesn't help to avoid cancellations, but it also means planes aren't working to their full capacity. The average cruising altitude for an airplane is about 35,000 feet. They don't technically need to be so high up, but that altitude gives the best speed and efficiency. Air gets thinner at higher altitudes, which means less wind resistance, but less lift. For most commercial aircraft, the area between 30,000 and 40,000 feet is the sweet spot where the two factors balance out. You probably still aren't using a laptop from 1999, and your computer isn't flying at close to the speed of sound. Fortunately, planes have a much longer lifespan than computers. There are airliners from the early 1970s that are still just fine. They might not be able to keep up in terms of speed and fuel efficiency, but older planes are no less safe than their modern counterparts. Contrails, those white trails airplanes leave behind them at high altitudes, are easily mistaken for engine exhaust, but most are nothing more than water vapor. During a flight, moisture in the air collects in the engines before being vented with the exhaust. The hot, wet air leaving the engines mixes with the cool, dry air found at high altitudes, resulting in long, thin lines of vapor. Humidity determines when contrails form and how long they remain visible. Ever notice the numbers on the end of a runway? They're actually used to show the pilot which direction the plane is facing. For example, the number 36 is short for a heading of 360 degrees or due north. Along with numbers, the letters R and L indicate if the nearest runway is to the right or left. The lights on the tips of a plane's wings are called position lights or navigation lights, and they're used during times of reduced visibility. They help planes to see each other in the dark and can also tell pilots what direction an aircraft is traveling. The red light marks the tip of the left wing, while the green light is on the right. The third light is white and found on or near the tail. It might seem odd that the flight crew cares whether your window shades are up or down. The main reason is so that the passenger's eyes can adjust to the outside light. Mostly, it's just a matter of getting people on and off quickly. But in an emergency, the last thing they want is people stopping to blink before they evacuate the plane.
Hello, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard today's flight from San Francisco to New York. Fasten your seatbelts, and I'll tell you what's going on inside the plane at different stages of the flight.
Passengers always board from the left side. That's because the captain sits on the left side of the airplane cabin, so it's easier for him to align the plane with the terminal jet bridge from that side. Also, the aircraft is fueled and loaded with baggage on the right side. With passengers boarding from the left side, the crew can do their job undisturbed. If your priority is to get out of the plane as fast as possible once you arrive, pick an aisle seat near the front of the plane. If you want to have the most comfortable flight, pick a seat in the middle of the plane because the turbulence is less noticeable there. An even better option in terms of comfort would be those seats by the emergency exit. They have more legroom and you can stretch. If you want the safest seats on the plane, your best option is the back of it. Once you're seated, take your time to spot the nearest emergency exits. Count the number of rows between your seat and an emergency exit. It can save your life in case you have to leave the plane quickly. You'll manage to find the exit easily, even if everything around is dark or if you're blinded. You'll find it just by touching the seats and passing the number of rows you counted in advance. Boarding completed. Time to get ready for takeoff. Cabin crew are walking down the aisles to make sure all passengers are following their instructions. Okay, everyone has their seatbelts fastened and window blinds open. There's no one in the bathroom and the runway is all clear. Why aren't we still moving? We can go! Turns out, the aircraft must wait for a while. It's all about safety. When a plane takes off, it activates two powerful forces. One is jet wash, a fast-moving gas so strong it can easily flip a car, so no one can be near the plane. Another force is wingtip vortices that are the result of the wind generating the plane lift. These powerful rotating forces go from both wings and stay in the air for about 3 minutes after an aircraft takes off. If another plane flies into the air while the wingtip vortices are still there, the pilot will lose the roll control over the aircraft. The plane will flip over and crash. So, no plane is allowed to take off without waiting for at least 3 minutes after the previous one leaves. Back to the pilot's cabin. There are two people there, the pilot and the co-pilot. In case something happens to the first pilot, the co-pilot can take over. Both pilots eat different food to reduce the risk of them both feeling unwell. While the first pilot controls and adjusts the autopilot, the second one monitors the controls or communicates with the control tower. Also, there are checklists for safety standards to be satisfied at different stages of the route. So, while the captain is focused on the route, the co-pilot can complete the checklist and make sure that everything's going according to the plan. Flying is costly, so not only the passengers, but the airline as well want to make the flight as fast and short as possible. The shortest way is always a straight line. Still, aircraft routes look like an arc. It's because the Earth isn't flat like we see it on a map. It's a sphere. So, these lines only appear like arcs when we project them on a map. In reality, they're pretty much straight. Every airline and every plane wants to fly this most efficient way, but there are hundreds of planes flying every day, often in the same direction, so the air highway is pretty busy. The route data of every plane is pre-planned and is uploaded to the system. There are several of those so that the pilot has options if something goes wrong or if weather conditions change. The pilot can set up the right mode, and autopilot can control the airplane within its uploaded route. Keep up the altitude, speed, and direction. The pilots, meanwhile, keep an eye on the autopilot and focus on other tasks like navigating, planning, and communicating with air traffic control. On the ground, air traffic is managed by dispatchers, who watch over planes and make sure they don't get too close to each other. The air traffic is especially heavy in some places, so when an aircraft enters a busy zone, it has to follow a very specific route. There are also specified points called Fixed Navigational Aids, or, shortly, nav aids. Those are devices on the ground that send radio signals in the sky that an aircraft can pick up on. There are also waypoints, which are geographical points on Earth. They're loaded into the GPS system, and an aircraft has to follow them. So basically, the whole route is flying from one waypoint to another all the way to the destination place. Time to start the descent. You can see the plane's altitude on the control panel. The pilots know the plane's speed, so they can calculate at what distance to destination to start their descent. If the altitude is 27,000 feet and the speed is 300 nautical miles per hour, the first number divided by the second gives us 90 nautical miles. This is the point they have to start the descent to maintain the descent path. There are also a couple of other things to consider, such as the wind speed and direction. or uneven speed drop. To descend, pilots have to get approval from the controller. Sometimes, due to traffic, they don't get it right away. So, they just keep moving forward without descending, therefore shifting away from the descending profile and land when the approval is given. Takeoff and landing are the most crucial and dangerous phases of any flight. That's because the pilot has less time and space to react to any occurring problems. In the air, even if both engines stop working, a plane won't just start falling. Instead, it'll begin to glide through the sky, losing about 1 mile of altitude every 10 of them going forward. So, the pilot will have about 8 minutes to react and find a safe place to land. If an engine fails during takeoff or landing, the pilots will only have seconds to decide if they should still take off and deal with the problem in the air or cancel the flight. Even if something happens, canceling the flight isn't always an option. When the plane reaches the speed of 100 miles per hour, you can't possibly stop it before the runway ends. And getting off the runway isn't good, to say the least. To ensure everyone's safety, the rules at these stages of the flight are especially strict. You should turn on the airplane mode on your devices to make sure that the signals that devices transmit don't interfere with the plane's electronic systems and don't block the radio's frequency. You've probably heard that clicking sound a speaker makes right before your cell phone gets a call, if it's right next to the speaker. These sounds are what the pilot might hear instead of the instructions while communicating with air traffic control. Even a 1-second interference can cause a lot of confusion. Just some certain types of cell phones can cause this problem, and if it's a combination of factors, the cell phone type, how far away it is from the cabin, and how many cell phones aren't in airplane mode. The cabin crew can't find out which of the passengers didn't put their phone into airplane mode, but the pilots will always know when many people didn't do it. You should keep your window blind open during takeoff and landing for safety reasons as well. This way, your eyes get used to the light or the darkness outside. In case of an emergency, during these risky stages of the flight, people who are comfortable with the natural light will react and evacuate faster, which is crucially important when every second matters. For the very same reason, the lights are dimmed in the airplane. This way, the light will be closest to the light outside the aircraft. Another reason is that if the window blinds are open, people from the outside can see what's going on in the plane. For example, they can see if there's a fire inside and where exactly it is. This way, they can plan the evacuation better. They ask you to fold up your table and put up your seat in the upright position to ensure that in case of an emergency, there will be no obstacles in the way. Everyone should be able to leave the plane as fast as possible. The passengers aren't allowed to use the bathroom during takeoff and landing because there's no seatbelt, no safe escape route with no obstacles, and it's not safe overall. A person can get trapped there during evacuation. The pilot isn't even allowed to take off or land while someone is in the bathroom. And looks like we're ready for landing.
Welcome to New York.
Tires on the landing gear don't burst because they're designed for a load that's 4 to 5 times as great as they experience during landing. The wheel itself might break, but the tire won't burst. This little tip based on people's psychology can help you choose the fastest line at the airport. If there are several lines at check-in, opt for the left one. It's believed that you'll get to the counter more quickly this way. Most people are right-handed and intuitively choose the right side. Your skin usually becomes a bit dry during the flight. This happens because of low humidity levels in the cabin. Bring a good moisturizer with you to keep your skin hydrated on board. Do you know that airplane pilots always eat different meals before a flight? This way, if one of them gets food poisoning, the other will be able to take control of the plane. Airplane tray tables are some of the dirtiest surfaces in the cabin, so make sure to wash your hands frequently. And clean that table with an antibacterial wipe to get rid of all those bacteria living there. If you're sitting in an aisle seat, you can have more space to stretch your legs out. Just push the button on the underside of the outermost armrest. This will move the armrest up, giving you more space for your legs and preventing the armrest from jabbing into your side. Here's a reason why they turn the lights off in the cabin. Passengers need to get used to the darkness in case an emergency landing happens at night.
This way, their eyes are already used to the absence of light, which makes it easier to evacuate. Flight attendants ask you to open window shades so they can see what's happening outside. This way, they can choose the best way to evacuate passengers in case of an emergency. Almost all passenger planes are white, since this color best reflects the sun's rays and prevents the plane from heating up. Another good reason is that white paint is cheaper. Also, workers and engineers can easily notice any damage on a white surface. It's better to avoid making important decisions during a flight. Your brain doesn't get enough oxygen at such heights. This negatively affects its functioning. Chewing gum, hard candies, and mints can help you to avoid this annoying ear popping during takeoff and landing, but not because of the candy itself. You feel better thanks to the process of swallowing. Yawning helps too. As for the gum, it also helps get rid of that bad breath caused by the thin air at high altitudes, which pulls moisture right out of your body. Dry air can make you feel as if you're coming down with a cold. The air in the cabin dries out your nose and throat as if you have symptoms of a cold. These symptoms usually go away right after landing. The water they use to make coffee and tea on board isn't always clean enough. Yeah, many companies use very good water filters now, but still, it's better to ask for bottled water if you're thirsty. That tiny triangle on the aircraft wall over your seat means a lot for flight attendants. These triangles mark the windows through which you can see flashing indicators. Those signal the retraction of the landing gears and the closing of the flaps. Let's say the pilots find out there's some problem. In that case, a flight attendant rushes to the necessary window to check what's happening. But for passengers, this is just the best place for photos, since you can see the wings perfectly. Seats in the middle of the cabin above the wings are the best for you if you have motion sickness. This area is more balanced and shakes the least during turbulence. If you tend to get nervous during the flight, do some physical exercise not long before boarding the plane. A little workout helps lower your stress levels and makes your body release endorphins, the happiness hormones. Also, this physical activity compensates for the hours you spend sitting still. The turbines are located under the wings, since this makes it cheaper, faster, and easier to service the engines. Previously, they used to be placed in the tail. It required expensive equipment and much more time to repair. When they started installing the engines below the wings, ticket prices went down. Imagine you're flying in a hot air balloon. See the burner system installed under the gas bag, also called the envelope? It heats the air inside, which makes the balloon go up. So, turbulence is the same hot air but created by nature. When the air heats up, it rises a plane. When it becomes cooler, the aircraft goes down. And passengers feel as if they're riding a roller coaster. A stream of hot air left by another plane can also cause turbulence. It's common for most flights, but usually, turbulence is so light that passengers don't feel it. Do you know that planes can fly even after one engine fails? Pilots can control such emergency situations and land the aircraft safely. Passengers may feel a slight tilt during the flight, but in most cases, they don't even know the plane is flying with only one engine. Your eyes get oxygen straight from the air. It's not delivered by the blood. So your eyes can feel somewhat dry during the flight. Put eye drops in your bag. They'll help you keep your eyes moist. It's forbidden to carry large volumes of liquids on board because some hazardous substances can easily dissolve in water. If a plane has to land on water, its wings become a life-saving pillow. Empty fuel tanks help the aircraft stay afloat too. By the way, it can be from 10 minutes to 60 hours before the plane sinks. It all depends on the model, weather conditions, and the pilot's skills. Those smiling flight attendants you meet when you get into the cabin usually hide their hands behind their backs. They're counting people entering the plane to make sure that all passengers are on board. Despite all the words people say about airplane food, it's not actually so bad. The problem is your sense of taste. It's not so acute since the air in the cabin makes your mouth dry. It also dulls your sense of smell. That's why airlines add a lot of spices and salt to their meals. Is it true that your hair grows faster during the flight? Not really. Scientists haven't managed to prove it. This myth appeared in the first part of the 20th century when some passengers noticed that their stubble had grown longer during the flight. It's normal for people to get headaches during the flight, especially right after takeoff.
You climb to an altitude higher than Mount Everest within about 10 minutes. These changes happen too fast for your body to adjust. Seatbelts on planes stretch across your stomach to save you from getting slammed against the ceiling in case of turbulence. When it happens, the aircraft starts moving up and down, and your waist belt holds you securely. And seatbelts in cars protect people from horizontal collisions. Airplanes have special protection from lightning. Even if it strikes, passengers won't feel it. Planes are covered with an aluminum coating that conducts electric current but doesn't let it get inside the plane. Electronics and fuel tanks also have extra protection. Plane seats are so uncomfortable because airlines try to fit the maximum number of passengers on the plane. That's why there's so little space between seats. 2 additional rows means 12 more passengers. Also, companies make airplane seats lighter to save on fuel costs. Even seemingly insignificant extra weight can cost an airline thousands of dollars. And, by the way, your seat has a fire-resistant coating. It's necessary to prevent a fire from spreading in case of an accident. Airport workers transport unclaimed luggage to special centers. If the owner doesn't show up within 3 months, the baggage is put up for sale in specialized stores. You couldn't use your phone on an airplane in the past, since cell phones were really dangerous for navigation. Their radio signals could disrupt the settings in aircraft electronics. Oxygen masks fall down not only during strong turbulence, but also when the air pressure inside the cabin changes dramatically. Passengers are okay if they put on their oxygen masks, but in such cases are considered to be an emergency, and pilots do their best to quickly go down to a safe altitude so that passengers can breathe without oxygen masks. Each airplane carrying over 19 passengers must have a crash axe. You will see it installed as a firefighting device. That way, if there's an electrical fire, crew members can cut away the cockpit or some other panels. The pilots can actually break the windscreen if something bad happens and people need to evacuate. Passenger planes are mostly white to protect them from solar radiation and its effects. Aircrafts need to remain cool at airports in particularly hot countries, while passengers are going in or out. Brilliant white paint can bounce the sunlight back. It also protects some parts of the plane that are made of composite materials and prevents their damage since there's higher ultraviolet radiation at high altitudes. Commercial planes must get to speeds of at least 155 miles per hour to achieve stability and safety at takeoff. Some smaller planes can sustain altitude even at speeds of 30 miles per hour. But when speeds are that low, the plane can easily get destabilized and could even fail the takeoff. The white trails that planes leave behind, also known as contrails, are created because of water vapor. Vapor is produced during the combustion of fuel in plane engines. When the plane reaches its cruising altitude of 32,800 feet, temperatures get quite low, about -67 degrees Fahrenheit. It's really cold. So, the water turns into particles of ice. How long these particles are going to remain visible mostly depends on humidity. The higher the level of humidity is, the bigger those trails get and remain visible even long after the plane has disappeared. Airplanes all over the globe get struck by lightning almost on a daily basis. A regular airplane in commercial service gets hit on average once a year. How often it happens depends on a couple of things. First, how many landings and takeoffs the plane performs, since lightning mostly strikes at heights between 5,000 and 15,000 feet. It also depends on location. For instance, it's more likely for a plane to get struck by lightning around the equator and in some other parts of the world. Modern planes are designed to withstand such strikes. They have to go through special lightning tests to prove they can cope with strikes. Planes mostly fly at altitudes of up to 7 miles. There are some benefits like the thinner air or producing less aerodynamic drag, which also means less fuel consumption. The temperatures up there are lower, which makes the jet engines more efficient. That part of the atmosphere is also less turbulent, which helps make flights smoother. Some planes have already gone into space, but not the ones you see at the airport. Those classical planes need air to go up, and space is basically just a vacuum. The first plane that reached space was designed around 70 years ago. During its first flight, it generated lift and stability using its thin, stubby wings. It traveled more than 5 times the speed of sound. There are at least 1 sextillion planets out there in our universe. To give you an idea of how huge this number is, our planet weighs almost 1 sextillion times more than some animals like a bear. None of these planets are cubic, triangular, or any other shape. They're all round. At its beginnings, a planet is just a cloud of dust and rocks that rotates around a central star. Dust and small pieces attract each other because of gravity, and they keep doing it until they form a blob. Now, the blob starts attracting more matter. It grows and gets bigger until it's done with collecting everything in its path. Gravitational forces work equally in all directions, so that blob gets a round shape. But not the perfect one. Our planet, for instance, is almost a sphere, but with a bulge in the middle. The bulge is there because the Earth is spinning. Every time it rotates on its axis, the middle part travels further than the top. The area at the equator is moving quicker than the area at the poles. And the faster you spin something, the more you'll throw it outwards. Sound will travel 4 times faster in water than in air. It's a wave, and that's why it moves faster in a denser substance. Particles that are close to each other, as in denser substances, will bump into each other more easily. Water is denser. There are 800 times more particles in a bottle of water than in the same sized bottle filled with air. Bubbles are round because they occur in a thin film, such as one of soapy water traps air. The molecules in the film attract each other. That way, they stick together and also shape a sphere, because that's the smallest possible area that encloses any given volume. They can't get any smaller because they have trapped air inside. You can turn your pencil into a diamond. If you apply a temperature of 2,550 degrees Fahrenheit and pressure of 55,000 atmospheres, you can transform graphite into diamond. There are actually 2 variations of a single chemical element, carbon. Diamonds aren't just used in jewelry, but for different purposes. For example, as a cutting tool for electronic devices. Beavers are amazing builders capable of creating cool and complex riverside structures. They build them to protect themselves from wild animals that might go after them, like wolves or bears. But not in the way it may look at first. Beavers don't really live in their dams. They only use them as a barrier, making some sort of a pool or pond of deeper water. That's where their real home is, in the pool. It's like a small island or dome lodge. It's a dry area where beavers are safe. They can also store their food there. These pools are deep enough for land animals to avoid them. Beavers dig underwater tunnels that are entrances into their home. If a predator or some other danger is coming, they can quickly escape to safety. Some animals sleep while standing. Zebras, elephants, horses, some birds like flamingos. Cows can sleep while standing, but they prefer to lie down when they want to rest. To sleep while standing, animals need to have legs that can align vertically. That way, they don't have to activate their muscles to keep them standing. Their knees also lock in place. It's better for these animals to sleep while standing because they'd probably be too slow to react if there was a predator going after them. When we laugh in some unpleasant situations, or when we feel nervous, we're actually trying to mask our true emotions. For example, you do something embarrassing and try to cover up the shame you feel. Also, we're more relaxed after laughing, so if you're nervously chuckling in an unpleasant situation, it can help you clear some of your negative emotions. When you buy a bottle of water, you can see it has an expiration date. It's not that the water inside will turn bad. The expiration date is there because the plastic may start to leach into the water over time and contaminate it with chemicals that might be bad for us. The moon has its own time zone. The astronomers created a special watch for all moonwalkers. It measures time in lunations. which is the period of time the moon needs to rotate and revolve around our planet. Each lunation is almost 30,000 Earth days. You can decaffeinate your coffee if you take it into a sauna to moisten the green coffee bean within temperatures of 160 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit. The point is to get 10 milligrams or less of caffeine per one coffee. That's when you can put it in the decaf category. One serving of regular coffee has 50 to 75 milligrams of caffeine. There's a reason the Earth spins. Our solar system formed 4.5 billion years ago. There was a raging cloud of dust and gas. Molecules and atoms in that cloud had a tendency to rotate in a certain direction. That same cloud collapsed under gravitational forces. Gravity magnified its initial rotation and then flattened it out into a disk. Our planet formed within that disk, and now it's spinning because of that old pattern of its parent cloud.
A plane with no identification marks is approaching the coast of Indonesia. It's not the most peaceful of times, and the flight operator is alarmed. 2 fighter jets take to the sky, about to take down the unidentified plane. It's all about to end in a disaster, when the fighters notice one strange detail. December 1st, 1941. Captain of a Boeing 314, Robert Ford and his team are preparing for one of the longest flights on one of the biggest planes in the world. The Boeing 314 Clipper California is a high-capacity seaplane. It has no landing gear, so it can only land on water. Its length is 100 feet, and its wingspan is 150 feet. This is more than a 6-story building, and on board this plane, there is a restaurant, resting areas, and even a room with a bed. Despite its size, the Clipper California can stay in the air for more than 18 hours. Captain Ford doesn't suspect what is awaiting him ahead. He gets on the plane. Their flight is bound from San Francisco to Auckland, New Zealand. The first stop is Los Angeles. There's no problem with this. The next stop is Pearl Harbor. The flight is going fine. December 7th, 1941. It's been 3 days since the plane left Pearl Harbor. The last final step of the journey remains: flight to New Zealand. At this moment, Captain Ford receives an order to return the plane to the nearest Allied base. The way back is closed, so the plane continues to fly to Auckland. The Clipper lands safely at the Auckland airport and receives an order that seems impossible. Robert Ford and his team must paint over all the registration and identification marks on the plane and deliver it to LaGuardia, New York. Then, fly across the world. This is an uncharted route with a length of 23,000 miles. In the entire history of aviation at this time, no one has flown such a distance. The team doesn't have maps or modern navigation devices. They don't know the lands they will fly over. They don't know who they may meet on their way and at which airports they will land. They must maintain and repair the plane themselves, extract fuel, and plot the route. At the same time, they have almost no money. Immediately after receiving the order, the team goes to the Auckland Library. They study all the atlases and maps to create a detailed flight plan. First, they need to get to Australia, then fly to Africa along the coast of Asia, and then they should go to the US. The crew paint all over the signs on the plane and prepare for takeoff. Fortunately, before the start, one banker finds about their situation and gives them $500. The plane takes off. The team didn't notice they forgot to paint over the American flag. In a few days, it will save their lives. Before Australia, they fly to New Caledonia to evacuate a group of people from there and deliver them to Australia. The operation is successful. In Australia, the team needs to refuel the plane. They don't find special transport for Clipper services at that airport, so the crew themselves transport 800 cans of gasoline. And here's an important detail. The Boeing 314 doesn't use conventional fuel. It needs to be filled with special high-octane aviation gasoline. Early in the morning, the Clipper takes off and heads to Indonesia. The flight is going fine. They are approaching the airport. Meanwhile, the captain of the base where the Clipper is supposed to land notices an unidentified plane. He doesn't know who's flying it and from where. No one warned him about it. It may be an enemy plane. 2 fighter jets take to the sky. They are approaching the Clipper and don't see any identification marks on its body. The pilots are about to attack, but at that moment, they notice an American flag. If Robert Ford hadn't forgotten to paint it over, then everything would have ended badly for him and his crew. The fighters allow landing. The Clipper lands on the water. A boat floats towards it to meet the plane's crew, but stops. It turns out the plane landed on a place filled with sea mines, so the boat doesn't dare to sail there. The Clipper approaches the port and miraculously avoids contact with mines. Robert Ford and the crew of the plane are well met. They are going too quickly to rest and hit the road. But then, a big problem surfaces. The plane is running out of fuel, and at that naval base, there is only ordinary automobile gas. Nobody knows if the plane engine is going to go with it. It may burn out or stop working altogether, but there's no choice. They fill the tanks with ordinary fuel. Captain decides to take off using the remnants of aviation fuel, and during the flight, they switch to tanks with ordinary gasoline. When this happens, the plane's engine begins to clap and rattle, but after a while, it calms down. The flight continues. For 19 hours, they fly on dangerous fuel. Their next stop is Ceylon. The sky is covered with clouds. The pilot doesn't see the coast in the airport, so he decides to lower the plane below the clouds. They fly at an altitude of 300 feet above the surface of the sea and notice a huge whale ahead. The plane flies closer, and it turns out it's not a whale. It's an enemy ship. The Clipper begins to gain altitude to hide back into the clouds. Finally, they are again surrounded by a white veil. The booms and blasts are heard behind and below the plane. The Clipper's flying with zero visibility for 60 minutes. Finally, the clouds are clearing and they see the port of Ceylon. The team makes a short stopover and proceeds with its journey. As soon as the plane takes off, one of the engines explodes. Fortunately, they didn't have time to fly far from the port, so they successfully landed the plane on the water and repaired the engine. The Clipper continues its mission. Now, Robert Ford's team flies mainly over land. This is very risky, since the aircraft doesn't have landing gear and it can't safely land on solid ground. Finally, they get to the Congo. The team has a great time here, gains strength, rests, and most importantly, gets high-octane aviation gasoline. Things are going great, but there's another ordeal ahead. Now, the aviators will have to make the longest flight in their journey. Their next stop is a port town in Brazil, and the distance to it is 3,500 miles across the ocean. The maximum flight distance of the Boeing is 3,700 miles. Any deviation from the course or a strong headwind can easily prevent the aircraft from reaching the port. Worried, the crew refill the tank and load additional fuel onto the plane. They leave the Congo, taking off along the narrow river. At this moment, the pilot notices the river ends a few miles away with a waterfall. The plane must urgently gain altitude, but it can't. The large amount of additional fuel bears the Clipper down. The waterfall is getting closer. In the last seconds, the plane manages to rise to the desired height. But even after the waterfall, Boeing still doesn't get high enough. It hovers right above the rocky coastal cliffs. A slight inclination can lead to a crash. Fortunately, they manage to pass unharmed. The plane rises to the perfect height. During the flight from the Congo to Brazil, the crew broke a new record. It's 23 hours and 35 minutes in the air. The tired crew make a long-awaited landing in the city of Natal. However, the rest doesn't last long. 2 hours later, they take to the air and head to the next stop, an airbase in Panama. January 6, 1942, 5:54 a.m. The already legendary Boeing 314 is approaching LaGuardia, New York. The team can't wait to finish their journey. They contact the dispatch, and he tells them they can't land the plane only after 7 a.m., since the air terminal starts working at this time. For an hour, Robert Ford and his crew are circling in the air. It was probably the longest hour of their lives. Finally, the mission is complete. The Boeing 314 becomes the first passenger plane to make an almost around-the-world trip. This long flight lasted more than a month. This plane spent 209 hours or 8 days in the air. During this time, it covered more than 30,000 miles and made 18 landings.
They make plane wings smooth to let air flow easily around their surface and reduce resistance during the flight. So why did they add these convex yellow hooks? They obviously worsen the aerodynamics. Yeah, they do, but they're also necessary for your safety. Imagine a plane making an emergency landing in the open sea. Everything's going well. The aircraft is sliding on the water. Then rescue boats sail to this place to evacuate the passengers. They leave the plane through emergency exits located above the wings. Before the door opens, the escape slide inflates. Passengers need to walk on the wing and go down the slide, but the wing surface is slippery because of water. They might fall and get hurt. To prevent this, the stewards install a rescue rope. They attach one end to the door and the other to the edge of the wing, passing it through these hooks. During the evacuation, people hold on to this cable like a railing and don't fall. They can also attach rescue boats to the wing with a rope and these hooks, so the sea won't take people far away from the plane. By the way, the plane can stay on the water for 10 minutes to 60 hours, depending on the model, weather conditions, and the pilot's skills. Both the main and emergency exits have extra handles for crew members. During an evacuation, people may panic and accidentally push the flight attendants off their feet. To avoid a fall, they hold onto these handles. A seat belt on an airplane has a slightly different purpose from that in your car. The one in the vehicle protects you from a horizontal hit. When a plane is going through turbulence, it's shaking up and down. Your waist belt keeps you from hitting the ceiling. Crew members have handcuffs for problem passengers. If someone behaves badly and interferes with the flight attendants have the right to chain them to their seats. To do this, they use police handcuffs or plastic ties. This is the maximum that can be done during the flight. Then they report a rowdy person to the airport and hand them over to the police after landing. During an emergency, oxygen masks drop automatically. They have an extra purpose you might not know about: to equalize the pressure and prevent panic. Air pressure can change because of turbulence, so, among other things, the masks help passengers stay calm. Your seat is your safe haven. That life jacket under it won't let you drown. Also, the seat's surface is made of waterproof material. If water gets into the cabin, the seat will save you from freezing, since it won't get wet. It's also fireproof. The cover can prevent the fire from spreading through the cabin. But more importantly, it can save you from the flames. Of course, you'll most likely never have to use this feature, but it's nice to feel safe, isn't it? You can use the tray table in the seat in front of you like a hammock. Just tie a belt, a blanket, or a towel around the table and stretch your feet out. You might have noticed black triangles on the wall above the seats. For you, as a passenger, they may indicate the seats that have the best view of the wings, where you can take the most beautiful flight photos. But the triangles weren't created for your camera. The crew members monitor the condition of the aircraft through windows under these signs. Suppose the wings freeze, the engine catches fire, or the pilot receives a signal about some problem. In that case, the crew will quickly move to the triangles and assess the situation. And there you are, sitting under the triangle, looking at the wing and thinking, why are the wings located in the lower part of the plane? They could install them above the windows or right in the center. Actually, some planes have them in the middle and higher up, and each location makes sense. The engine and turbines are under the wings. It's much easier to repair them since they're close to the ground. And in case of an emergency landing in the sea, the wings act as a rescue cushion. They help to keep the plane on the water. Empty fuel tanks under the wing can also help the plane stay on the surface. But this position has certain risks. Debris can get into the turbines on the runway. Fortunately, this is unlikely to happen since they carefully clean it. Planes with wings in the middle get the least air resistance. That's why they build fighter jets and supersonic aircraft this way. Big cargo planes have wings in the upper part of the hull. Thanks to it, the aircraft stays close to the ground. It makes it easier to load cargo. Also, it's safer to land on unprepared runways with high wings, since debris won't get into the turbines. The aerodynamics of these planes works better thanks to such wings. They get less air resistance and deliver cargo faster. Oxygen inside the masks is a combination of chemicals. The transportation of oxygen tanks is too expensive for the airline. They take up a lot of space and increase weight, which leads to extra fuel consumption. Therefore, they use a chemical oxygen generator. It's located in the panel above your head. There's a small tank with barium, sodium, and potassium compounds. They mix and create a hot chemical reaction that releases oxygen and passes it into the mask. Small holes in windows save the glass from breaking. The air pressure inside the aircraft is much stronger than that outside. The difference is so big that the air can just break the glass from the other side. To prevent this, they drill small holes. The air penetrates there and reduces the load on the window. By the way, they have a round shape for the same reason. It's ideal for an equal distribution of air. If they were square or triangular, air streams with moisture would accumulate in the corners. It would lead to destruction. Plus, all water gets dried out thanks to the hole. Windows are made of triple glass. The outer glass takes the pressure. The middle one works like a fuse. The third layer protects the second one from passengers who like to touch it. Technically, the plane could fly with one layer, but it would be dangerous. They also installed extra protection for the wheels. They experience huge loads during landing, but don't worry, they won't burst. The tires can withstand pressure 5 to 7 times bigger than they actually get. See the toilet sign on the door? There's a secret latch under it. Crew members can unlock the door from the outside, so don't expect complete privacy. Of course, it's prohibited for other passengers to do that. The cabin crew can open it in case of emergencies. When flight attendants pass through the cabin during the flight, they always touch the upper shelves above the seats. They don't check if the luggage compartments are closed. Along the bottom of these compartments, there are handles in the form of jagged edges. Flight attendants hold on to them not to fall. It's a pretty convenient thing, especially for those who don't like touching the seats with sitting passengers on the way to the toilet. There's an important reason why they install turbines under the wings. Previously, they put them in the plane's tail to improve the aerodynamics of the flight. If one of the engines stopped working, the cabin wouldn't shake so much. Yes, planes can fly with one turbine running. Also, the wings were thinner and streamlined thanks to turbines in the tail, which was also good for aerodynamics. But it turned out that such a location meant additional costs. The engine in the tail was inconvenient to maintain. They used to place it high, so people needed special equipment and extra time to service it. And of course, it affected the ticket price. They started to install turbines under the wings to save money and time. Have you ever noticed the flashing light in the cabin before takeoff? This happens when the pilot disconnects a plane from the airport power supply and switches to the onboard one. This rapid transition may cause flashing.
Uh-oh, your airliner is filling up with people, so you hurry, looking for your comfy window seat and hoping to meet some pleasant neighbors, because a 6-hour-long flight to Hawaii with the ability to place your arms and legs as you want is an excellent start to your vacation. You relax into your window seat, already thinking of sunbathing on the beach once you reach your destination. You greet your first neighbor, who takes the aisle seat. You see the flight attendants are about to close the doors. You breathe out and stretch your legs. No more neighbors. Suddenly, the last passenger runs up to your row. It's as if he appeared out of nowhere. He tells you that you have taken his seat. You can't believe it. The flight attendant comes and asks you to vacate his seat. But why? You reserved online the window seat. You have no time to argue as the plane is taking off. So, you move to the middle seat. The guy puts his elbows on the armrests. Your aisle seat neighbor has already occupied the other armrest and put on his earphones. Huh? Seems like you are left without any space for your elbows. Let the silent telepathic fight for the armrests begin. You already know all kinds of middle seat neighbors as you fly frequently. Which one are you? The passenger who occupies both armrests is what we call universal, because he thinks he is the center of the universe, and the window and aisle seat passengers have to stay in their respective corners. He might narrow down the communication to elbow fights. Here, we recommend marking your armrest territory with words, no matter how awkward it might seem. But this doesn't sound like you. The switching passenger is the one who sometimes uses the left-hand armrest and then switches to the right. It's usually peaceful coexistence. Here, the communication remains friendly, with you exchanging smiles as you touch each other by accident. That's already closer to you, but not completely. There's also that shy passenger that uses neither the right nor the left side of the seat. He usually sits straight and awaits his arrival at the destination. He is afraid of any elbow contact with his neighbors, but he doesn't look like you either. The cooperative passenger constantly uses the front half of the armrest. and shares the other part with a neighbor. So you know there's a spot for your elbow and your neighbors know theirs. And zero unnecessary contact is guaranteed. Aha! It sounds like you. Now, you place your elbows on both armrests by moving the arms of your neighbors, smiling and indicating that they need to share the joint space. Now, we will reveal the secret about how you got the middle seat. Your airline had to change the plane at the last minute, and an entirely different seating plan put you into the middle seat. It turns out the flight editor could not keep your window seat anymore, as re-editing the seating plan within a short time is tough. Transporting everybody on board the new aircraft is like working on a puzzle. Another secret when they can assign a middle seat to you is if you get to the airport at the very last moment. If you've made no seat reservation and haven't checked in online, you're more likely to get a middle seat in the row next to the restroom. Or you'll be seated behind the wing and rewarded with extra noise from the engines. But you also have excellent chances to get a surprising upgrade or some extra space seated in the exit row or bulkhead seats. Algorithms drive our world these days, as you know. The secret here is that you need to use the same airline frequently. Then you will accumulate as many flight segments or miles as possible to become a status club member with pleasant privileges. And you will then be called the Gold One. Now, whenever you buy a ticket, your frequent flyer number will activate an algorithm in the reservation system. You'll be able to reserve an extra space seat online and get access to airport lounges. And even when the flight is not fully booked, the computer system will automatically block the middle seat next to yours. And you can enjoy spreading your arms and having no contact with a stranger during the whole flight. It can also come in handy to know how to get an upgrade at the last moment. Airlines regularly oversell seats on flights to maximize revenue and increase load factors. That's why they constantly analyze the number of no-show passengers for a certain time and date using a special software. It costs only $50 to $100 to an airline to upgrade an economy passenger to an empty seat in business or first class. That's why free airline upgrades can often happen. But for you, it's essential, especially if you're on a long flight. You will get your premium experience according to your priority status. It means that if you're on the gold list, you'll be of the highest priority ranking. Then the computer program will show the gate agent that your economy seat is no longer valid. The gate agent will change your seat number from 6A to 1A, and it means you can look forward to getting top service. And you will be the lucky one who gets a fancy drink, filet mignon, and a cozy seat on the more luxurious side of the cabin divider. Now, here's another secret. If you fly solo, you will have upgrades more often given to you rather than groups. If you order a special meal in advance, you will not get a free upgrade, as your meal cannot be upgraded with you. An airline controls the meal numbers and will not serve a special economy meal in business class. But you may as well get the upgrade if you are not a member of the Gold Club. Here's another algorithm that can help you get upgraded already at the check-in. A long-haul aircraft has, let's say, a total of 354 seats. We have 8 first-class seats, 42 business-class seats, and 304 economy-class seats. Now, let's assume there are 4 first-class passengers, 20 business-class passengers, and 330 economy-class passengers. The economy class is oversold by 26 people. Now, who will be the lucky 26 passengers to sit in the front, and when will it be decided? The airline supervisor instructs check-in agents to take notes of the arriving passengers, and they will silently put some of them into the SFU list. It means suitable for an upgrade. You will not notice your probable upgrade at that moment. At first, the check-in person will give you a standard economy class boarding pass with a seat number printed on it. It all begins 1 hour before the departure at the gate. That's when the check-in counter closes, and now the staff knows the final figures. Let's assume all 354 passengers appear on time. The last 26 economy passengers get their boarding passes without seat numbers, and the supervisor finalizes the passenger list. The first lucky 4 business class passengers with an upgrade can move to the first class, and 22 people from the economy class get upgraded to the business class. Now there's enough space in the economy class. New boarding passes get printed, and the gate supervisor announces the names of those who got lucky. That's why it's good to board late, because upgrades are still being processed up to the very last minute. By the way, check-in agents not only take your bag and give your boarding pass, they're also responsible for your admission to your destination on international flights. While talking to you at the counter, the agent gets a computer answer, an OK or a N-OK to board. Thanks to the pre-checks at the departure airport, the international arrivals border control goes much faster as some work was already done at the departure point. And you usually appreciate it because, this way, you can leave the airport quickly after a several-hour flight. The check-in agent also ensures that passengers do not carry excess hand baggage. While boarding the plane, you're welcomed by a friendly smile and hello from one or two flight attendants. You might not know it, but at this moment, the chief cabin attendant is secretly checking you whether you are fit to fly or not. They pay particular attention to possibly aggressive passengers, those that might get removed before the flight. While you're taking your seat on board the plane, flight attendants are spread throughout the cabin. They welcome you and check that you don't stow any hand luggage at the exit or bulkhead row. During the meal service, flight attendants control what you drink and ensure you do not exceed a certain amount. Be careful, flight attendants are watching you, but only to keep you safe. Have you ever noticed that one of the flight attendants hides their hands behind their back when you enter the plane? Are they crossing their fingers for a safe takeoff? Nah. At this moment, they're counting the passengers as they board. They have a special little counter for this. There are lots of stories about how bad airplane food is. In fact, it's not that bad. It's your sense of taste that's on the fritz because of the dry air. It dries your mouth out of all its saliva and dulls your sense of smell, which helps to feel 80% of what you taste. So, airline companies add more spices into the food so you can feel the taste. Seatbelts are located on the stomach because of the turbulence. When that happens, the plane sort of jumps up and down. Your waist belt holds you so that you don't crash into the ceiling of the aircraft. The shoulder seat belts in the car protect against horizontal collisions. By the way, flight attendants also have shoulder seat belts. It's because they always sit facing the passengers to keep order. While all passengers are flying face forward, the cabin crew sits backward. If the plane goes forward sharply, passengers get pushed into seats, and the flight attendants are held by shoulder and waist belts. Even if lightning strikes a plane, the passengers won't feel it. The entire aircraft is covered with an aluminum layer that conducts electric current without passing it inside the plane. Good thing. And all electronics and fuel tanks are equipped with additional protection. Before any plane is released from the factory, all this protection is tested by simulating lightning. Many passengers get a headache during the flight, especially right after takeoff. This happens because you're getting up to an altitude higher than Mount Everest in about 10 minutes. The air up there is thin. Your brain gets less oxygen. By the way, chewing gum or candies can help. Now, the main reason why the seats on the plane are so uncomfortable is profit. Airlines want to make more money, so they try to fit as many passengers on the plane as possible. Because of this, there's so little space between the seats. 2 additional rows in the cabin provide 12 new passengers. Also, companies make airplane seats lighter to spend less fuel. Seats become smaller and less comfortable. You can feel cold inside a plane, but when the plane is flying at high altitudes, the conditions resemble those in the Sahara Desert. It's all because of very low humidity. Every hour of flight, your body loses a lot of liquid. Stay hydrated, but only choose bottled water. Many companies don't show movies because they can make passengers too sad or emotional. Even if a movie doesn't have a dramatic story with incredible characters, it can still be heartbreaking for passengers. The thing is that our body experiences stress, and we take everything close to heart because of the lower oxygen levels. Also, we're sitting in seats at a high altitude and very far from home. Our brain realizes we're out of control of the situation. This feeling of helplessness can throw a person's emotions out of whack. so companies only show positive movies and comedies. Some passengers say they feel like they can't think straight during the flight. This happens because of a lack of oxygen, so your mind isn't in top form. Well, better not do any important tasks or make any important decisions. Your corneas are the one part of your body that doesn't have a blood supply. The only way they get oxygen is from the air, so worsened eyesight and dry eyes are common problems on airplanes. The best solution here is to take with you eye drops along with gum. That worsened vision is the first reason the crew dims the lights and asks you to open the windows during nighttime takeoffs and landings. Your eyes need to be adjusted to the dimness in case of an emergency. The second reason is the plane crew needs to be able to see out the window. There's a theory that hair grows faster during the flight. Some people notice that little stubble appears on their faces after the flight, even if they shaved a few hours before they got on the plane. Anyway, this theory is not confirmed. Some say the cabin pressure, lower temperature, or even heightened stress levels can accelerate hair growth. If you experience stress and get nervous right after you step on the plane, your best solution can be a little training. Go to the gym or make a set of squats before boarding to prevent stress. Also, a good workout compensates for the hours you spend sitting still. Airlines lose and send in the wrong direction several million lost bags a year. Almost half of the lost luggage is lost because of transfer issues. They may not deliver your suitcase just because of lack of time. A plane can fly away before loaders put your luggage there. When this happens, they might carry these bags to another flight. And when your bag goes to the wrong place, it can be taken by other passengers accidentally. If you want to find your lost luggage quickly, take a photo of it in advance and then show it to the airport workers. You can also buy a special GPS tracker and put it in your suitcase. It works for 6 days, and you can use your phone to locate your luggage wherever it is. Airport staff take unclaimed luggage to a special center. If the owner doesn't show up within 3 months, the things inside the bags will be put up for sale in specialized stores. There, you can find clothes, jewelry, and electronic devices. And of course, it all comes with a big discount. The rumbling noise you hear after boarding is not my stomach. It is luggage being loaded on the plane. The compartment is right under the cabin of the aircraft, so it sounds quite loud. Aircraft tires can withstand pressure 4 to 5 times more than a plane actually gives them during landing. The metal wheel is more likely to break than the tire. Pilots also have different meals. This is necessary to reduce the risk of food poisoning. The flight can go well even if one of the pilot feels bad because of a stale burrito. If 2 pilots ate the same burritos, they could lead to problems. Oxygen masks drop down when the air pressure changes. At a certain height, there can be less air in the cabin. To prevent passengers from feeling this, they should put on oxygen masks. When pilots descend to a safe altitude, you can breathe without the mask again. By the way, masks only have oxygen for 15 minutes. This is enough for the pilots to descend to a safe altitude on which passengers can breathe. The wings of most passenger planes are located at the bottom of the plane. It's built this way because of the engine. It should be installed under low wings because it's closer to the ground and easier to repair. Another reason is that the wing should take a big part of the blow during a bad landing. And if the plane falls into the water, then the wings become a life-saving pillow. Fuel tanks installed in the wings are empty after the flight, and it helps to stay on the water too. The wings of cargo planes are located at the top to make it easy to load the cargo since the hull is located very close to the ground. Also, it helps to avoid getting debris into the engines in case when airfields aren't clean. Plus, this wing location has less aerodynamic resistance during the flight. Little triangles on the aircraft walls are special labels for flight attendants. The triangles mark special windows. You can see flashing indicators through these windows. It signals the landing gear is retracted and the flaps are closed. But for ordinary passengers, this is the place with the best view of the wings. Turbulence is a common thing during a flight, but usually it's so insignificant most passengers don't even feel it. Strong turbulence is rare. By the way, turbulence is just hot and cold air affecting a plane. For better understanding, imagine a big balloon people fly on. Remember the flamethrower installed under the ball? It heats up the air and the hot air raises the ball up. So turbulence is the hot air created by nature, and it makes the same thing with a plane that it makes with a balloon. Also, turbulence can occur if the plane gets under the hot air stream left by another plane. Joseph Walker is about to have an historic flight, but he does not know of it yet. He smiles at his chase pilot, showing the OK sign, and closes the cockpit of his steel friend, the newest unpowered rocket plane, X-15. It's placed under the wing of a B-52 bomber. They take off and go up to 45,000 feet. Joseph is calm and full of joy because he has been getting ready for this moment his whole life. He trusts his steel-winged friend like no other. The bomber drops the X-15. The rockets fire up, and with a fantastic thrust, Joe flies steeply toward the edge of space. He knows his dream of making the first ever suborbital plane flight will soon come true. Joe adjusts the controls to intensify the rocket energy. In contrast to the usual blue sky plane view, the beautiful curved planet Earth view and a black horizon is a visual privilege only a few people can have. Joseph Walker's reaction shows he is experiencing zero gravity. "Welcome to space," the pilot says quietly. "We did it, guys." The Walker surname has always automatically propelled him to action. He just had to go forward, strive for higher results, and not stop. As a teenager, he loved to run, arms outstretched at the sides. He imagined that his legs lifted off the ground suddenly, and he felt himself flying, soaring up both as a man and an airplane. When he worked as a test pilot, he used to fly over city lights at dusk. They assembled themselves into gigantic mosaics below and reminded him of faraway stars he wanted to reach. His dream of becoming an astronaut and getting the astronaut wings, which he considered a great honor, was born at that time. On his way to his dream, Joe studied a lot and got a bachelor's degree in physics. He also had extensive test experience in the early X-series aircraft and 27 flights in rocket aircraft after joining the NACA, which stands for the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, in Dryden in 1951. He combined the experience with sound engineering judgment. What drives a test pilot to risk his life every day? Courage, duty, devotion, passion? All of it. Joe was a talented test pilot and would not have traded jobs with anyone, but he had always aimed higher. So he became the right person for the X-15 spaceflight program when he was invited to be its chief pilot. The whole team, including the engineers and all the 12 test pilots, had to prove that they could design an airplane that would fly and survive at hypersonic speeds. Before, there was only a theory about hypersonic flight and subscale wind tunnel testing. That's why there were many questions like, will they be able to prove it? Will they manage to design an airplane that will be stable and controllable at hypersonic speeds? Could they possibly create a structure that would survive the high heating rates associated with hypersonic speeds? And, more importantly, could a pilot survive and function adequately in this high-energy environment? When the X-15 launches from the bomber's wing, it first goes into a free fall for several seconds, and only after that the rockets can be ignited. So there was a considerable risk of a rocket failure too. The team also had to design an airplane that would be controllable outside the atmosphere and could successfully re-enter it at high speed and steep entry angles. If the X-15 took the wrong angle, the plane would be destroyed. So could they prove all of this? To regularly tempt fate is a real job of any test pilot. Joseph knew the anatomy of his winged friend as much as his own because his life depended on it. The X-15 looked like a big propellant tank with a cockpit. It was 50 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 13 feet high. But the propellant tanks took up approximately 25 of those 50 feet. The X-15 weighed 15,000 pounds without propellants and 33,000 pounds loaded with them. The propellants consisted of liquid oxygen and anhydrous ammonia. To fly at the hypersonic speed of Mach 6 or 4,000 miles per hour, one must have an airplane that will survive temperatures as high as 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's why the X-15 was built of steel Iconal X, a tough, high-strength nickel-steel alloy. Only 3 aircraft were built. The X-15 was by far the fastest plane existing at that time. It could fly at a speed of up to 7 times the speed of sound, which is 4,520 miles per hour. Joseph Walker could fly to the edge of space and land again within 12 minutes. The plane was powered by a liquid rocket engine, Reaction Motors XLR-99, which delivered a powerful thrust of 57,000 pounds. During Walker's first X-15 flight, he was unaware of how much power the rocket motors had, and he was slammed into the pilot seat yelling, "Oh wow!" The enormous ejection seat weighed 270 pounds. It had 2 large stabilizing fins deployed after ejection and 2 large telescopic booms that extended for seat stabilization. The aircraft had a conventional wing, although small, with only a 22-foot span and roughly 200 square feet of area. The aircraft's tail was unusual, with 2 canted horizontal and 2 vertical surfaces. These tail surfaces resembled the feathers on an arrow. They served the same purpose, keeping the aircraft stable and pointed in the right direction. The upper and lower vertical tail surfaces were pretty large and thick compared to conventional airplanes. They were wedge-shaped in cross-section with a sharp edge in front and a broad base at the rear. This provided additional stability and prevented the aircraft from swapping ends at extremely high speeds. The airflow sensor on the airplane's nose determined the airflow direction and impact pressure. This sensor was referred to as the ball nose. It was servo-driven to align with the airflow affecting the aircraft's nose. From this, the engineers obtained the angle of attack, the side slip inclination, and the impact pressure of the air flowing over the aircraft. The ball nose was cooled with liquid nitrogen to prevent it from melting during high-speed flight. Walker sometimes liked to playfully bet with his fellow test pilots who would be the first to lift the rocket plane above the Kármán line, the internationally accepted boundary of 62 miles. On August 22, 1963, during Flight 91, Joseph Walker sets a world record of the highest altitude of 67.08 miles reached by an unpowered plane X-15. The X-15 is hoisted up to the pylon on the B-52 wing. The hoists are located in the X-15 servicing, fueling, and mating areas. All pre-flight checks are completed. Takeoff. The X-15 is the first aircraft to utilize an inertial platform and a computer. Standard barometric instruments are almost useless in the X-15. Joseph has them on the instrument panel, but he only uses them during landing because they don't work at high altitudes or outside the atmosphere. For a sizable portion of the flight, he uses inertial data for control and guidance. Launch. The X-15 drops away from the bomber and gets into a free fall for several seconds. Then the rockets start by burning within 85 seconds, producing extreme power. Joseph pulls the plane up at a steep climb-out angle to start forming a long parabola and comes out of the atmosphere. The pilot has good visibility since the windows are next to his head. One very unusual thing about the visibility out of the X-15's windows is that the pilot cannot see any part of the airplane. He cannot see the nose, he cannot see the wings. Nothing. Typically, pilots use the nose and the wings in an aircraft for attitude reference. In the X-15, all Joseph has for a reference is the window frame, which is very disorienting on the one hand. But on the bright side, such a panoramic view is just right to enjoy the splendid horizon, a boundary between Earth and space. Joseph thinks how quiet it is here, like nowhere else. Mission completed. Joseph completes a perfect parabola and re-enters the atmosphere successfully. The X-15 is like a tough old bird that pops and bangs as it accelerates above extreme speed. But it all hangs together and gets Joseph Walker back home. He is ready to start a glide, landing from space. The X-15 has some outstanding features that significantly enhance the safety of landing. It has highly effective speed brakes, which are essential in an unpowered aircraft to adjust energy and ensure a pilot gets back to the ground safely. The more effective they are, the more precise the control of the power and the more accurate the landing. It's hard to imagine, but the pilot lands the X-15 only about 11 minutes and 8 seconds after its launch, having gone through the distance of 337 miles. Joseph Walker makes history as the first civilian test pilot flying to space by a rocket plane twice. Despite all the risks of the X-15 program, the courageous test pilots pushed the very limits of their piloting skills and physical health to master groundbreaking experimental technology. The program's overall success helped develop the Space Shuttle program and paved the way for NASA to continue to the moon decades later. Joseph Walker got a lot of awards and the cherished astronaut wings, but only many years later. The Lunar Landing Research Vehicle, used to develop piloting and operational techniques for lunar landings, was trusted to be piloted by Joseph, and the famous moon crater Walker was named in his honor. Ooh, look up in the sky. See that white trail? These are called condensation trails or contrails, and they're like artificial clouds planes leave behind. Up there, the atmosphere is of much lower vapor pressure and temperature than the hot gas emitted by the plane's engines. The hot gas and cold air mix together and freeze, turning the gas into tiny droplets of water, and they create the contrails. You can determine the weather by the way the trail looks. If it's thin and short, the weather is nice and the humidity is low. But if the trail is thick and long, it's a sign of high humidity and might be a warning of an upcoming storm. Sometimes contrails can even be colorful. The droplets of water that are formed up in the atmosphere can freeze in different sizes, so they all reflect sunlight at different wavelengths, causing the effect of a rainbow. When all the colors mix, it appears white. That's the color of a common contrail. Meanwhile, there are tiny black triangles above some of the windows on airplanes. The triangles mark the seats that give the best view of the airplane's wings. The crew needs this to find the right spot as fast as possible if they need to inspect the engines, slats, or flaps in case of an emergency. This way, the little triangles save the plane crew a lot of time. An airplane window has 3 panes of plexiglass. That tiny hole you've probably noticed is only in the middle pane. It's there to regulate the huge pressure difference between the inside and the outside of the cabin. Thanks to it, the outer pane can handle the load. If the outer pane breaks, the middle one, even though there's a hole in it, will be able to keep the window intact. That little hole also keeps the windows from fogging up. Airplanes don't take off with the wind, but actually against it. Just think of an airplane as a kite. To make a kite fly, you launch it against the wind, and there it goes. That's because there are 4 forces of flight: lift, weight, thrust, and drag. The lift is generated because the speed of the air is higher above the kite than below it. So the pressure below is higher than the pressure above, and the kite is pushed upwards. This is the lifting force. There's also an opposing force, the force generated by gravity that pulls the object down. That one is called weight. The thrust is the force that pushes the object forward. In the case of a kite, it's generated by the string, the wind, and the forward motion you're making. In the case of an airplane, the thrust force is generated by the engines. Finally, drag is the opposing force of thrust. So, to launch a kite into the air, the lifting force must be greater than the force of weight. Then, to stay in the air, all the 4 forces must stay in balance. Lift must be equal to weight, and thrust must be equal to drag. Now, an airplane needs airflow over its wings to fly. This airflow isn't generated by the plane's engines, but by the wind. The stronger the airflow, the greater the lift. Going against the wind increases the flow of air over the aircraft's wings, giving it some additional lift and letting it get to a higher altitude in less time as it takes off at a greater angle. The same works for landing. Landing against the wind lets a pilot descend faster, covering a smaller distance. The airflow and the lifting force are responsible for turbulence. The direction and speed of the wind and the airflow aren't constant over time. Sometimes they change pretty quickly, like 100 times per second. So one moment there's more lift, and the other moment there's less lift, and the plane is shaking. That's what you call turbulence. It's not dangerous at all, it just means you fly through the area of highly inconsistent wind, and that's all. Turbulence is the worst in the back of an airplane, so if you're afraid of it, try not to sit there. Commercial airplanes fly at an altitude of around 36,000 feet. They travel at that height for extra efficiency. Up there, the air is less thick, so there's less resistance, and a plane can fly faster and burn less fuel. Flying in the lower stratosphere also allows to avoid birds and weather patterns like rain and clouds, as well as turbulence. High altitudes are efficient, but people can't survive up there. So the aircraft are designed in such a way that their shape supports the internal structure. The windows have to be as strong as possible so that they don't crush. Every corner of a window is a weak spot, so a square window means 4 weak spots and windows that easily break at high altitudes. That's why plane windows are made round. This way, the stress is evenly distributed all over the window surface, and there's less possibility of a window breaking. Most early airplanes were painted metal or chrome colors. Now they're mostly painted white, and there's a reason for that too. Colors absorb light. If you go out dressed in black on a hot day, your clothes will absorb it and you'll feel even hotter. The white color reflects the light, so painting an airplane white means that it will heat up the least possible and will be less likely to be damaged by solar radiation. Also, any other color would start fading over time because it's constantly exposed to sunlight. White airplanes look physically appealing for longer, and white allows spotting any damage on the aircraft more easily. If you've ever taken a night flight, you might have noticed that a plane has flashing lights on its wings. There are different types of those. The red and green ones on the wingtips are called the navigation lights. There's 3 of them. The third one, that's white, is at the end of the plane. From the pilot's perspective, the light on the right side is green and the light on the left is red. They're visible to the pilot with an angle of 110 degrees. The white light at the end of the plane is visible with a centered angle of 140 degrees. So together, they make the whole circle of 360 degrees. These lights help pilots or other planes determine in which direction the plane is flying. If a pilot sees green on the right and red on the left, the planes are going in the same direction. If red is on the right and green is on the left, then the planes are going in opposite directions. But don't worry, even if 2 planes go facing each other, they won't collide. The airspace is 3-dimensional, and planes are assigned to fly at different altitudes. Air traffic is managed by dispatchers who watch for planes and make sure they keep a distance of at least 1,000 feet from each other. There are also flight level regulations. All the westbound flights fly at even-numbered altitudes, for example 34,000 feet or 36,000 feet. All the eastbound flights fly at odd-number altitudes, like 35,000 or 37,000 feet. This means that there are a couple of thousand feet between the planes flying in the same direction. To share the sky safely, each aircraft must follow its own airway that even has a specific name. Aircraft don't have parachutes that can be used in case of an emergency. They only carry oxygen masks, life vests, and boats to use if the plane has to land on water. It seems like parachutes could save many lives, but in reality it's not so. For starters, it's not efficient to have them on board. They're costly and heavy, which means the plane would need to burn more fuel. It would be justified if parachutes could help dramatically, but they can't. Commercial planes aren't designed to jump out of them, especially when there are a couple of hundred people flying. The next thing is that passengers aren't even trained to use them. In case of a real emergency, 200 people trying to deal with a parachute for the first time in their lives would create a real mess and wouldn't help at all. Finally, it's not even safe to jump from those high altitudes planes fly at. So yes, parachuting from a commercial aircraft would be a real drag.
February 2nd, 1970. We're at an Air Force base in Montana. Today, the 71st Fighter Interceptor Squadron plans to hold a training sortie. 4 pilots get into jet planes and take off. Shortly, one of the pilots accidentally activates the braking parachute. A fabric dome shoots out of the plane. It's filled with air and interrupts the flight of the aircraft. The pilot has to land. The other 3 pilots continue the training. They arrive at the designated place and begin to simulate an air fight. Every pilot is a professional in his field. They have undergone similar training many times. But something amazing is going to happen today. The pilot of one plane, Major Curtis, must fight with 2 other planes. One of the Major's opponents is Captain Faust. 2 planes are chasing the target. Major Curtis turns his jet and directs it straight upwards. The other 2 planes follow suit. The Major performs a maneuver, vertical rolling scissors. He flies up in a spiral while simultaneously making a barrel roll. Then he turns around and flies down, performing a dive. The pursuers are not far behind. Major Curtis makes another aerial maneuver. He goes to the side and flies past Captain Faust. At this moment, the captain's plane begins to shake. Its front part lowers, and the jet hurtles to the ground at great speed. Captain Faust can't do anything. The plane doesn't listen to him. The control stick doesn't work. The engine's breaking down. The captain activates the braking parachute, but that doesn't work either. The plane is getting closer and closer to the ground. It can no longer be saved. Now it's important to save at least Captain Faust's life. He ejects and opens the parachute. Suddenly, the abandoned plane starts to fly straight. The flaps on the wings are activated, and it stops falling down. The plane without a pilot flies and slowly descends. It goes at a speed of 200 miles per hour and disappears from sight behind the cliffs. Captain Faust lands safely on a snow-covered field. The other pilots see this and are afraid the plane will fall in a nearby town. They immediately head in that direction. At the time, the unguided aircraft descends, touches the ground, and slides along the field. Next, it makes a 20-degree turn and breaks through a small fence. The plane stops at a farmer's field. The owner of the farm calls the local sheriff. The sheriff arrives and calls the nearest military base to report what happened. He approaches the fallen plane to assess the damage and turn off the humming engine. But as soon as he gets closer, the plane begins to hum and shake as if it wants to escape from there. The plane owners arrive. They are surprised because the plane is in almost perfect condition. They deliver it back to the base, repair it, and return it to service. In 2016 in Belgium, a train was traveling without a driver. That day, people at 2 railway stations saw a train slowly moving between them. It didn't make any stops, brake, or accelerate. It was just slowly riding onwards. Passengers couldn't contact the driver and get out of the vehicle because no one was controlling the train at the time. Panic was rising. People began to say that a ghost train without a driver appeared. But the truth turned out to be not so mysterious. The empty passenger train had been leaving the station according to the schedule when the driver noticed some kind of malfunction. He stopped the train and got out of the cabin to see what happened. But for some reason, the train started again by itself, and the driver didn't have time to jump on it. Fortunately, everything ended well. The driver warned all his colleagues about the runaway train. Everyone was evacuated from the train stations. Then, at some station, one brave driver jumped into the cabin right on the move and stopped the stray train. Speaking of ghost trains, you can see such things in the UK. They pass through railway stations that have long been abandoned. If you get on such a train, you'll probably be the only passenger. Authorities let these trains drive because it's economically profitable for the country. To cancel the route of a ghost train, you need to go through a lot of bureaucratic procedures and spend tons of extra money. So, they travel all over the country and don't bother anyone. Now we go to the ocean to learn about the ship that was drifting for several months without its captain. The ship's called Alta. It was bought by a new owner in 2017 and marked with the flag of Tanzania. Almost all cargo ships are equipped with AIS, Automatic Identification System. That's a navigation system that works on the principle of GPS. All vessels are equipped with AIS, so their movement in the ocean can be tracked. This feature was disabled for the Alta. The ship disappeared from the satellite's eyes and reappeared several times. In 2017, it sailed by Greek port cities. The Alta made 12 stops in 3 such towns in different parts of Greece. Then the AIS signal disappeared. 10 months later, the Alta appeared again on the northern coast of Africa. In September 2018, it was headed to Haiti. During this trip, the ship's engine failed. The nearest shore was far away. The ship began to drift. A few days passed. The crew couldn't repair the vessel. The food supply was almost out. The situation was getting worse as a strong hurricane was approaching the place where the ship broke down. Fortunately, a rescue boat came to the sailors. They were all evacuated shortly before the hurricane hit. The Alta stayed drifting in the ocean. After a while, another ship came to tow it to the coast of Guyana. But something went wrong. Somebody stole the Alta. It's unknown who did it and why. Then, almost 1 year passed. In the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, a British Navy ship notices the drifting Alta. There's no one on board. No one controls it. Then, almost 6 months later, a resident of a small town in Ireland sees the abandoned ship off the coast. Somehow, the Alta was able to cover the distance across the Atlantic and wash up on the coast of Ireland. The Irish authorities said it had been a miracle that no one else saw the ship. It sailed calmly for such a long distance, surviving storms. They started an investigation to establish the owner of the vessel. It's important to find a responsible person who will tow off the Alta. It's extremely difficult to do so, though. They didn't find the owner. One day, an unknown person called the Irish authorities and introduced themselves as the proprietor of the Alta, but didn't provide any evidence. But the record for the longest drifting vessel along the ocean belongs to the SS Bechimo. People were seeing this ghost ship at different times for 38 years. It was a merchant ship owned by a Canadian trading company. In 1931, the ship got blocked by ice off the coast of Alaska. A strong snowstorm began. The crew waited a week for the bad weather to end, but the storm only intensified. One day, when the storm subsided a bit, part of the crew went to the nearest town. The rest of the crew members and the captain set up camp near the vessel. The storm didn't stop for a long time. The blizzard was so strong that people couldn't see beyond their stretched hands. Finally, when the storm was over, the captain went to find the ship. And couldn't. He decided it sank during the snowfall. A week later, the ship was found, drifting near the place where it was lost. Its hull was damaged so badly that it was unsafe to sail on it. The captain decided to abandon the vessel. However, it didn't sink. For the next 38 years, it was seen drifting at various points along the coast of Alaska. The last time people saw the frozen ship stuck in the ice was in 1969. In 2006, a special project was created to find SS Bechimo. However, in all these years, they've found nothing. Its fate is still unknown. It's likely the ship found peace on the seabed of the Chukchi Sea. The year is 2045. You arrive at the airport and get your face scanned with a biometric device that replaces your ID or boarding pass. Friendly robots pick up your luggage and direct you to your gate. You do some duty-free shopping in virtual reality and get in line to board the Flying V. You've picked your favorite seat in the second cabin. In there, you can choose between a staggered seat or a bed, even in economy class. You're walking past the group seat section, where friends and colleagues can spend time together face-to-face and discuss things. You're on a long-haul flight today, so you went for a bed to get all comfy on your way to your destination. With the Flying V, you can't choose to sit over or by the wing because all the passengers sit right in the wings of the plane. The cargo hold and fuel tanks are also in there. The plane looks like an arrowhead, with two wings stretching out behind the cockpit in a V shape. The oval cabin is pressurized and has an aerodynamic design. Everything inside the plane is made as light as possible. Thanks to it, it's more fuel efficient than other aircraft. The idea of this new revolutionary plane came to a student who was working on his thesis at Berlin's Technical University. It was further developed by the Delft Technical University in the Netherlands and supported by KLM Royal Dutch Airlines. They decided to make long-distance flights more sustainable. The Flying V shares many characteristics with the Airbus A350, the most advanced aircraft as of 2021. It can also seat 314 passengers and take up 1,700 square feet of cargo. It's smaller and shorter than the A350, but has the same wingspan of 213 feet, slightly longer than the height of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It means it can fit in the same already existing gates, runways, and hangars at airports worldwide. It has less inflow surface area, which means less resistance. Less resistance means less fuel needed for the same distance, 20% less than the Airbus A350 to be precise. But it gets even better. KLM plans to make it completely emission-free with electrically boosted turbofans. They also believe they could keep manufacturing costs pretty low compared to other unusual and efficient new designs with unique components. Experts tested a 50-pound, 10-foot scale model of the new plane in July 2020. They controlled it remotely, and it successfully took off at a rather low speed, but had a rough landing. It means there's still work to be done to make future flights comfortable for all passengers, including those sitting close to the side of the aircraft. Airbus has spent months testing another unusually shaped plane. It's just 10 feet wide. That's about 3/4 the length of a Volkswagen Beetle. It looks like a flying wedge and could start a revolution in the aerospace industry, improving environmental performance. They believe the remote-controlled Maverick with a blended wing design has great potential. The fuselage in regular planes is basically useless weight and needs massive wings to stay aloft. With the new design, the whole airframe gives lift. It means the plane can be lighter and smaller and still carry the same weight. One prospective problem with Maverick could be boarding and leaving the aircraft. The wide central section could slow it down, and passengers in the middle would be far away from emergency exits in case they need them. At the same time, it would give passengers additional legroom and larger aisles. Another Airbus invention is an XLR plane with a third fuel tank that will travel up to 10 hours without the need to refuel, or 5,400 miles without stopping. That's 1,000 miles more than other narrow-body models. Boeing has spent years working on its own revolutionary concept, the transonic truss-braced wing. This plane has folding wings that are 170 feet long, longer than an average commercial plane. It's possible thanks to the truss used in plane construction that supports the extra-long, ultra-thin wing. It also makes the plane more aerodynamic and allows increasing its cruise speed up to some jetliner speed. The new design is going to need 9% less fuel than regular ones. It could even run on battery power for short-range flights and partially use electric power to get the needed thrust for longer distances. Switching to a gas and electric battery hybrid would help make flying cheaper. A Denver-based startup named Boom is determined to produce the first civilian supersonic jet after the collapse of Concorde almost 2 decades ago. They're partnering with Rolls-Royce to develop the engines for the future plane. It would fly at twice the speed of sound, but would be slower over land. It would still take passengers from the East Coast to London or from the West Coast to Asia in half the current time. They promise the fares won't be much higher than regular business class tickets, with an added bonus of oversized windows for all passengers. Boeing designed the biggest twin jet in the world for long-distance international routes, the Boeing 777X. It's meant to carry between 384 and 426 passengers and will have a unique folding wing. It will bend up at a right angle to fit the wide body into tight docking spaces at airports. The plane will have a wider cabin, dimmable windows, and supersized overhead bins. Some designers and aircraft engineers have been experimenting with plane concepts with no windows at all. One of them is called Ixion and has cabin walls lined with flexible high-definition screens, projecting 360-degree real-time video footage of what's going on outside the aircraft. 2 cameras mounted on the jet's wings would capture the image. The screens are supposed to be low voltage and powered by solar panels on the plane's roof. They could also use parallax technology to split the screen and let passengers see different views at the same time. 2 strips running along the jet's body would fit the air conditioning and cabin lighting. Windowless private jets of the future could have high-definition screens programmed by passengers using their mobile phones, letting them choose what they want to see on each side of the jet. Removing the windows would reduce the weight of the aircraft and give more flexibility to the jet's interior design. It would also minimize engine noise by insulating the fuselage and also make the aircraft safer without the holes needed to install windows. The only exception would be the conventional window in the cockpit for the pilots. Airbus plans to reimagine the plane's interior with zones for passengers to do different types of activities. An area for business meetings, another one for socializing or playing virtual reality golf and other games. The screens in the social area could be connected to passengers' gadgets, letting them control what's on the screen and give presentations. They could also include a revitalizing zone where passengers can sit back and chill in a smart seat that will offer various pleasures, from a mechanized massage to aromatherapy. There will also be more planes with individual sleeping cabins, showers, and bar areas, and even full-size in-flight spa zones. Airbus is planning to build beds for economy-class passengers in cargo holds. They will be passenger modules of the same size and shape as cargo containers. Airlines will be able to load them aboard for long-haul flights and take them out for shorter flights or when they need extra cargo space. The modules will look somewhat like upscale hostel rooms, with all surfaces in glossy white and curtains for privacy. Economy class passengers will be able to rent one of the beds for less than the price of a business class ticket. They'll be able to stay there at all times, except for takeoff and landing, or rent a bunk for half of the time on flights of 12 hours or longer. Large aircraft already have bunk beds for crew members downstairs to let them rest on long-haul flights. They could also use cargo holds to host lounges, conference rooms, medical suites, and play zones for the youngest passengers in the future. Swappable modules could replace regular seats. Some airlines are experimenting with a meet and seat program. It lets you share your social media profile with other passengers on your flight. You can pick someone to sit next to based on your professional or personal interests, or just your likes. This option could spread to other carriers in the near future. Seat pockets on planes are mostly filled with in-flight magazines, a plane safety guide, and information about the airline. But they're also home to all sorts of trash, grime, and bacteria that just don't belong there. A passenger coughs into a tissue or wipes their runny nose with a handful of them, but instead of immediately getting rid of them, it gets placed into the seat back pocket. Now another passenger comes along on the very next flight, sitting in that same exact seat. With limited space around them, putting some of their belongings into the pockets leads to potentially millions of germs spreading significantly to them. It's no wonder that these seats' back pockets can get so nasty. Everybody puts their trash inside of them. Passengers often leave uneaten candy bars, diapers, apple cores, and nuts. This leaves crumbs and other matters everywhere. All of this trash is taken out before the next flight, but they're rarely ever deeply cleaned. It's all dependent on the airline itself as to how often they'll really clean the plane and wipe everything down properly. The plastic tray tables where we eat and place our things are one of, if not, the dirtiest parts of any airplane. These seatback tray tables that we use can have over 2,000 CFUs, colony-forming units of bacteria, per square inch living on their surface. The ridged texture keeps cups of soda from sliding off the table, also creating tiny mountain ranges where the microbes attach themselves. Sugary sodas and juices that spill onto tray tables throughout flights give bacteria the perfect environment to stay and feed. Bacteria love living on this plastic almost as much as human skin. And there are lots of microbes that your tray catches and holds onto, especially when they're not thoroughly cleaned. Much like air vents that are always fiddled with, seatbelt buckles are probably the most touched thing on any aircraft. The average buckle can contain nearly 1,000 colony-forming units of bacteria per square inch on it at all times. Passengers touch seatbelt buckles to go to the bathroom. Even after washing their hands, people will walk down the aisle touching all the headrests for balance to get to their seat. After settling in and buckling up, most will then touch their face, eyes, phone, and even food for the rest of the trip. Airports can be big virus spreaders, but they're cleaned constantly. The same cannot be said for the subway, buses, or even taxis. Subway door handles, luggage carts, chairs, seats, and poles are very rarely cleaned and are a breeding ground for all sorts of nasties. New York City's subway system is one of the dirtiest in the world, with a mind-boggling 2 million bacteria colonies per square inch on nearly every surface. Many of these have still yet to be identified. They're that rare. It goes with you everywhere. sometimes even into the bathroom. As a result, cell phones could be up to 10 times dirtier than any toilet seat. E. coli, the bacteria that can give stomach cramps and fevers, can live for hours on warm surfaces like phones. The best solution? Wash your hands thoroughly before touching phones, and make sure that phone gets a good wipe down with a disinfectant. Most people have a smartphone by them day and night, meaning that all the bacteria picked up during the day is transferred to them. Everyone touches the remote control at some point, but it isn't even thought of when cleaning the house. It falls to the floor or gets into the side of the sofa, a warm, dark home for mold and bacteria, where there are lots of crumbs and grime. A good clean with an antibacterial wipe every so often will help keep it shiny and germ-free. Blowing out candles on a birthday cake can expel a mist of saliva that always lands on the birthday cake frosting. This can lead to some very unhappy birthday parties if someone is sick. Sometimes it's better to skip the candles altogether, or accept the risk that every day is someone's birthday celebration, and a little bit of spit won't always hurt you. A single ATM gets touched by hundreds of people in a day. The chances that at least one of those people touching the buttons is sick and freely spreading the flu or cold is naturally quite high then. The flu, for example, can live up to 2 days on objects. It can even be days after someone has recovered from that virus that it'd still be active and spreadable. ATMs are cleaned, but not all the time. It would be impossible to service every single one in a major city daily. A single dollar bill can be home to thousands of different kinds of bacteria, including the usual suspects like E. coli, staph, and a bacterium that causes acne breakouts. Paper money can reportedly carry more germs than a household toilet, and bills are a hospitable environment for gross microbes. The smaller in value of the bill, the dirtier it will be because it's in circulation more. Money can't be cleaned like a lot of things, but taking it to a bank for new, hopefully cleaner bills is possible. Use hand sanitizer and wash your hands after handling money too, just in case. Grocery store shopping carts can have more bacteria on them than what's ever been found in public restrooms. That includes toilet seats and the flushing handles. Cleansing wipe dispensers have been appearing at many major grocery chains, and some stores even go the extra mile to clean them after the day's through. But these simply aren't enough to keep up with the petri dish that the handles are. With over 100,000 bacteria per square inch, it's nearly impossible to keep them clean. Toothbrush holders hold onto moisture and are rarely cleaned, making them one of the dirtiest things in our homes. It can be filled with salmonella, E. coli, and lots of mold over time when it's not getting cleaned regularly. Wash your toothbrush holder in hot, soapy water every week to minimize the chances of getting sick. Toothbrushes should be changed every 3 to 4 months for a very good reason. It takes a while for the toothbrush to dry. This creates the perfect home for mold and fungus to spread and grow. There can be more than 600 different kinds of bacteria living inside of your mouth. A kiss alone can transfer about 80 million bacteria from one mouth to another. A good brushing routine will have around 1,000 to 100,000 bacteria living on each tooth's surface. But for those that don't brush, bacteria can be up to 100 million or 1 billion bacteria on each tooth. The dirtiest thing in our home can only be one thing: the kitchen sponge. It's wet, absorbent, and food and dirt are rubbed into it all the time. Then we wipe down our kitchen tops just to spread all that grubbiness around some more. Sponges are very hard to keep clean. The best way to keep things sanitary is to replace it when it starts to smell bad. It's no surprise that if the sponges are filthy, then sinks are too. Rinsed fruit, vegetables, prepared raw meat, and dishes needing cleaning all make their way to the kitchen sink. This creates an extremely high breeding ground for E. coli, salmonella, and many other gross things. They'll stick to the sides and drain holes and grow like crazy. Clean sinks before and after each use, and make sure to keep them as dry as possible to prevent any mold growth as well. Restaurant menus and condiment dispensers aren't cleaned nearly as often as they should be. If someone with a cold was using the condiments right before you, this greatly increases the chance of the cold-causing bacteria being on your hands and then your fries. Menus are rarely washed with disinfectants after each use. customers have been touching quite a few things like chairs, tables, their faces, or hair before they give the menus back. Dog toys need to be cleaned regularly to prevent any bacteria or mold growth from spreading too much. Each time a dog slobbers on a toy, they don't just transfer their mouth bacteria. They've created a sticky, wet place for other germs to live on. There's no way of telling just what their favorite plaything has picked up around the house or yard. Purses and bags could have more bacteria than we really considered. They're regularly placed on dirty floors, bathroom floors, countertops, and out on the street. This exposes them to all sorts of germs, like salmonella, E. coli, mold, and fungus, all the time. Alcohol wipes are very good to carry around in your purse or bag to give them a good wipe down when needed. Drinking fountains are a cesspool of bacteria and germs. Over 2 million bacteria per square inch can be found on the fountain's faucets alone. As they get wet and touched by hundreds of hands, the bacteria and mold begin to grow. If someone has coughed or sneezed near it recently, those particles will cling onto the water. This creates a higher chance of the next person drinking from it catching something.
Okay, shocker. Airplanes don't take off with the wind, but actually against it. I'd think that if you take off with the wind, it pushes you forwards and helps you fly faster, but this is wrong. So I did some digging for us. We should think of an airplane as a kind of kite. To make a kite fly, you launch it against the wind, and so it flies. Here's how it works. There are 4 forces of flight: lift, weight, thrust, and drag. The lifting force is generated because of the differences above and below the kite. Above the kite, the speed of air is higher than below it. So, the pressure below is higher than that of the pressure above, and the kite is pushed forwards. This is the lifting force. There's also an opposing force, the force generated by gravitation that pushes the object down. That one is called weight. The thrust is the force that pushes the object forward. In the case of a kite, it's generated by the string, the wind, and the forward motion you're making. In the case of an airplane, the thrust force is generated by the engines. Finally, drag is the opposing force of thrust. So, to launch a kite into the air, the lifting force must be greater than that of the force of weight. Then, to stay in the air, all 4 must stay in balance. Lift must be equal to weight, thrust must be equal to drag. The moment the plane takes off, going against the wind helps to generate the needed lifting force faster. Yes, going against the wind does decrease the ground speed of an aircraft, but that's not the speed we need. An airplane flies due to the speed of air flowing over the wings. This airflow isn't generated by the plane's engines, but by the wind. And the higher the airflow, the higher the lift. Going against the wind increases the flow of air over the aircraft's wings, giving it an additional lift and allowing it to achieve a higher altitude in less time, because it takes off at a greater angle. The same works for landing. Landing against the wind lets a pilot to descend at a shorter distance in a shorter time. The airflow and the lifting force are the things that are responsible for turbulence. The direction and speed of the wind, and therefore the airflow, isn't constant over time. Sometimes it changes pretty quickly, like 100 times per second. So one moment there's more lift, and the other moment there's less lift, and then the plane is shaking. This is called the turbulence zone. It's not dangerous at all, it just means that you fly through the zone of a highly constant wind, and that's all. So if a pilot is given the option of how to take off, they'd pick to take off into the wind. It's not always the case, and it's not a problem taking off with the wind, but going into it helps a lot. Many airports are designed so that most runways are taking the direction opposing the most typical wind direction of the area. Also, taking off and landing are the most dangerous stages of any flight. That's because the pilot has less time and space to react to any occurring problems. In the air, even if both engines stopped working, a plane won't just start falling. Instead, it'll start gliding through the sky, losing about 1 mile of altitude for every 10 of them going forward. So, the pilot will have about 8 minutes to react and find a safe place to land. During takeoff and landing, the time is limited. If an engine fails, the pilot will have seconds to decide if they should still take off and deal with the problems in the air or cancel the flight. The thing is that canceling isn't even always possible, even if something happens. If the plane has already reached a speed of 100 miles per hour, it can't possibly be stopped before the runway ends. Physics. And getting out of the runway isn't good. Flying is costly, so not only the passengers, but the airline as well wants to make the flight as fast and short as possible. So there's no surprise here, there's always the most efficient way to go from point A to point B. And the shortest way is, of course, a straight line. Now look at some aircraft routes. These don't exactly look straight, but don't let this trick you. We have to keep in mind that the Earth isn't flat like we see on a map, it's a sphere. So these lines only appear like arcs when we project them on a map. In reality, they're pretty much straight. If there's an efficient way, this means that every airline and every plane wants to fly this way. But there are hundreds of planes going from North America to Europe every day, and many go at the same time. Turns out, the air highway is pretty busy. So how come the planes never collide? That's because before a flight starts, the crew make a strict flight plan that is uploaded to the aircraft's computer, and that pilot will have to follow. To be completely honest, there are several of them, just to have options if something goes wrong. What helps to avoid any colliding is that the airspace is three-dimensional, and the planes don't only fly in several lines as cars, but also at different altitudes. Air traffic is managed by dispatchers who watch for planes and control that they don't get closer to each other than 3 miles. There's also flight level regulations. All the westbound flights fly at even-numbered altitudes, like for example 34,000 feet or 36,000 feet, and all eastbound flights fly at odd-number altitudes, like 35,000 feet and 37,000 feet. This means that there's a couple of thousand feet between the planes flying in the same direction. To share the sky safely, each aircraft has to follow their own airway that even has a specific name. There are also some parts of the air that are especially busy, having remarkably high traffic because many planes fly there every minute. So, whenever an aircraft enters a busy zone, it has to stick to a very specific route. So, usually, commercial aircrafts fly on the altitude between 31,000 and 38,000 feet. This altitude is reached within the first 10 minutes of the flight. So, why so high? With height, the air gets thinner, so the plane faces less resistance and can fly faster and burn less fuel. Another reason that they fly so high is that the plane avoids most of the weather patterns that usually happen way lower. High winds and rain happen in the troposphere, the atmospheric layer that is closest to the ground. Planes fly just a little bit above, but already in the next layer, the stratosphere. Since most of the weather phenomenon are avoided, the flight is smoother and there's less turbulence. But then why don't they fly even higher? Remember the force of weight that pushes the object down. An aircraft is very heavy, and the more you weigh, the harder it is to get higher, because the force is stronger. To push it even higher, more fuel will be needed, and that's inefficient. Also, the oxygen becomes too sparse to fuel the engines, so the planes usually fly the most efficient way, high enough to avoid the weather patterns, but not much higher so that they don't spend too much fuel. If you've ever flown, you've probably noticed those little holes on the windows. An airplane window has 3 panes of plexiglass. That tiny hole is only in the one that's in the middle. It exists to regulate the huge pressure difference inside and outside the cabin. This way, the outer plane can handle the load. If the outer pane breaks, the middle one will keep the window intact. Also, that hole also keeps the windows from fogging up. Have you noticed that whenever you enter the plane, you enter it from the left side? It's not random. Firstly, the captain usually sits on the left side of the airplane cabin, so it's easier for the captain to align the plane with the terminal jet bridge from that side. Also, the aircraft is fueled and loaded with the baggage on the right side. With passengers loading the plane from the left side, the crew can do their job undisturbed.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and